Welcome to GROGTALK. GROGTALK Live. This is we're trying this instead of me spending my whole weekend uh, downloading, editing 4K videos. We said, you know what, we'll just stream it live to our vast audience out there. We're on the internet. Who would have thought back in 1983 playing D&D would have us to be worldwide celebrities that we are, right?
If you told me back then, in the 80s, that one day I'd be on the internet, I wouldn't know what you're talking about. I'd find it hard to believe. What?
What is it? What is a net? How are they interrelated?
I'm just glad, Al Gore, was able to. Well, all right, we should move on.
That's right. Moving on. I'm sure. Well, whatever subscriber had, they just unsubbed at this point, but that's okay. So I'm James.
I'm Dan.
And this is episode 5. And episode 5, we're going to conclude one way or another the trials and tribulations of Pixie and Glade. One of my goals is, fortunately we're filming this in the morning, so it can't be a drinking game every time I say Trixie as opposed to Pixie, because Dan was even getting frustrated with me. He couldn't have saying it too much. So it's Pixie and Glade.
Well, it upset Pixie.
Right.
Not me, but it upset Pixie.
Pixie upset him so much that he's collapsed on the ground now in the hands of goblins and hobgoblins. So if you want to see how he got to that fate, go to last week's episode. So today we're going to hopefully finish the adventure as I'll let Dan recall it when the party gathers, and then we're going to talk about the second component of Dungeons and Dragons. We talked last week about exploration and a lot of good topics there. This week we're going to talk about encounters, and an encounter does not have to be combat. It can be some interaction that moves past the environment, and typically it's with an NPC or with the other players, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Dan, you ready to see the conclusion of this adventure and what's going to happen to Pixie and Glade?
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
Okay, that's hope springs eternal. But especially after last session, I just
it couldn't get worse.
Well, after last session and last night when you ran, believe me, I thought it was pretty dim, and somehow we pulled it out, and we'll have to talk about that in our suggestion or some other segment. So, the party gathers. And Dan, you want to recap where you think we are in the session, or where Pixie and Glades are?
So my recollection is Pixie has sadly been captured. So Pixie was down, right, and out, but not dead.
As far as you know. As far as you don't know.
Exactly, right. As far as Glade
yeah.
Knows. But so Glade was horrified to see Pixie. Glade and Pixie, I think, did some things well in this adventure. They've done some things not so well, and I think one thing that they didn't do well last time was that they rushed into combat. Should have been a little bit more stealthy, and so Pixie is currently maybe dead, maybe unconscious, taken by a hobgoblin and some goblins, and Glade fled, realizing that the odds seemed insurmountable, and has gone back and found John the blacksmith, for whom they were undertaking this adventure. And John, much to Glade's surprise, because Glade was expecting John to grab, a meat cleaver out of the kitchen.
Maybe a poker or something like that.
Exactly, right. Instead, I think, what was it?
Bastard sword.
A bastard sword.
That's right.
Right. And then did he put on a suit of plate mail?
No, he does not have full plate mail.
And the sword wasn't glowing? I thought it was glowing.
No, it didn't flame or anything like that. It was it was a bastard sword over the mantle.
So he's not on a war horse with.
Well, he called his celestial war horse. It's actually coming. He'll meet him on the way there.
Got it. No spell book. Right
no,
now.
He does not have a spell book.
Okay, but so John, but I feel a little bit better about John. At least that he's got. So John. So basically, what's happened is Pixie has been replaced with John, the 0 level. I don't know. I say this.
That's right.
What I would think as Glade is a 0 level fighter, and John has now realized perhaps he should play some role in saving his daughter's life.
Right. Yes, the hysteria that he had when his daughter was missing, and the relief that he came to seeing 2 strangers has now. It's realized upon him that the fate of his daughter rests with folks who may not be really prepared for this. So, yes, you were about to head out back to the underground dungeon or temple.
I've had a lot of time to think about it. I say to John, before we leave,
Yes.
do you have anything that might be of assistance, such as a net, a large sack, anything which would help us that you can think of?
Well, yes. Yes, we need to move quickly. I'm sure she'll be dead before morning. But here, so he looks through. He grabs a large sack. You see him. He has a vial in his pouch that he puts a vial in his pouch of a small clear liquid about this size.
Really?
Yes, and
Now he brings that out.
yes, and then he also he runs back to his shop, says, "Follow me," and he hands you He looks at you. You're awful skinny, and he says, "This was Alyssa's. I used to try things on." Threw this on, and it appears to be a chainmail shirt.
Oh.
And a small metal cap for you. These were Alyssa's when we used to pretend to be knights, and puts on a chain shirt as well, and a helmet, and also takes a wooden buckler and asks, "Do you want a wooden buckler as well?"
Would. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. John, now...
And he carries it. He has his torch, and he takes a couple of torches with him, and he's ready to go.
Let us
that
proceed.
takes about 10 minutes to don all that on. So now your armor class, because it's not full chainmail, would be with shield AC 5, armor class 5.
I say thank you, John. Let us make haste and try to save Alyssa.
Right.
Before
So
it's too late. And Pixie, of course.
right, that would be great. So you head back, and of course, with John not being a ranger, he's a large figure as you're running through the forest. So you have the opportunity, potentially, for someone to encounter you.
Okay.
Now it's closer to midnight at this point, plus or minus. Glade and John are successful to get to I'll say you're at the edge of the forest like you were the last time. What do you do?
Okay, so do I see anyway? So we see the entranceway.
Well, it's going to be hard to see because he has his torch out.
Oh, so the entranceway was further from...
It's about 40 yards away from where you were.
Ah, I see. Is there any way to go around the edge where we could get to a point where the torch would illuminate the entranceway without walking into the opening?
Yeah, you could probably go around the back of because it's basically at the edge of the forest, where the doors are. They're stand at the edge of the forest, so you would have to go around it. The problem is, you're obviously, if you have light, if someone was outside,
Right.
they would see you going.
Right. Well, so torches, I assume, as John has brought something to relight the torch with.
Yes.
Okay, so I asked John to please, because I am, right, so my ranger is a half-elf, if I recall it, so it would have infravision.
That's true.
So, and how much, do you know what the moon was? Does moon?
It's completely pitch black,
Right,
remember.
great. So and that's just as an aside, does a full moon spoil infravision? Or probably, I don't know how much light.
As far as I know, it's, again, that's another discussion with infravision. It's the fact that the heat is supposed to be the issue, but then there are other times that light affects it as well. I'm sure there's been Dragon magazines or other magazines that go over it, but basically I will say maybe a full moon would interfere with it, but anything less than that would augment it.
And as you mentioned, it's a new moon anyway. So I'm going to ask, I say, John, would you please put out your torch so I can use my infravision?
Yes, whatever we need to do.
Put it out quickly.
So he puts it in the ground and he grabs you.
Yes, I'm here. And then I wait for my infravision to kick in, because it's got to adjust.
Takes, a couple of segments, yeah.
Okay. And then do I see any heat sources?
Larger
than a bunny?
No, you don't see anything. In fact, it's very cold. Obviously it's except for the mist that seems to be oscillating out of the temple or dungeon area like you saw previously. You do not see any other figures.
Okay. So I say, John, there appears to be no one at the entranceway. Follow me. So, and I say, don't put the torch on yet again. Just hold me on the back, and I will lead you toward the entrance.
Okay, sounds good. So you lead John you're at the entrance now.
Okay. And so, is there light? I'm trying to remember. Is there light coming out of the entranceway?
It's a little bit, because you remember the brazier room is about 30 feet in and then 30 feet to the right of you.
So is there appear to be enough for John to see?
Yeah, it's pretty It's like, like you're approaching a campfire.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is Glade is going to listen in to see if I hear anything coming
Okay.
from the entranceway.
Glade does not hear any noise.
I say, okay. So I say, John, I don't hear anything. Let's go in. And I'm going to lead the way and have him follow behind me.
Okay, great. So you go down the stairs, which goes down 30 feet, and it goes to the right.
And I'm going to, yes. And again, when I get to the edge of the stairs, I'm going to listen. And then if I don't hear anything, I'm going to poke my head around.
Okay. So you descend down, and you're going to try to poke around to the right.
I think just like last time, right? Heading toward the brazier room, correct?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so give you a chance. Okay, great. So Glade is successful, at least she feels. She peeks around, and she notices there are two goblins that are that seem to be sitting on the brazier, or near the brazier.
Do I get any sense if they are positioned as they were when we propped two of them up there? Am I able to discern whether they seem to be in that same position?
Roll under your wisdom.
Okay. So this would be what we call an ability check, right?
Ability check.
And this is one of the few times you want low, right?
Yes.
Because I've got a 14 wisdom, so I want to. Usually when you say make a check, unless the DM says otherwise, you're talking about on a D20. Usually, is that correct?
That's right.
A 1.
Yes, you definitely recognize them as the goblins that you had slain.
Okay.
And fun fact, I was listening to a Roll for Initiative podcast, and they mentioned
You're cheating?
A3. I do look at other podcasts. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We'll talk about that
Sorry.
offline. I apologize.
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
And they'd mentioned A3, Area of the Slave Lords, and in there they call for a dex check. And so I don't know if that's the first time in an official module.
Oh, interesting.
Remember we were talking about last time, when did this house rule became official? So in A3, Area of the Slave Lords, there's a moment where you have to roll under your dex in order to avoid a trap.
That's right, because there's nowhere, if I recall correctly, there's nowhere in any of the core books that it talks about that.
It talks about you should come up with something reasonable if there's a roll not.
Right. And I think, and then we're probably digressing here, but what I think is interesting is that there's not a lot of modifiers. I try to do it every now and then. A lot of it's just sort of a straight check. I think it's just because it's easier. It gets time consuming. Say at +4, at -3. And anytime when I say plus, like at last night game, people get confused. No, plus is bad on
that's right.
on an ability
Add
check.
40 to your ability roll is bad. That's
right. And you could always subtract 4 from your wisdom, whatever.
Exactly.
I'm sure our listeners get the point. Okay, so I turn back to John. I say, John, relax. There are 2 goblins down there, but I believe these are 2 goblins that Pixie and I already slayed and propped up there. But so let's be careful though, because it might be a trick. I'm gonna walk up slowly. John, you follow behind me. And so I'm gonna start walking up. And I'm looking for any sort of... The brazier still going?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so as I get closer, I'm looking for any sort of movement from these guys.
Okay, so as you move around the brazier, looking down the hallway that goes to the left where you have the main combat, they do not appear to move. You don't see anything down the hallway.
Okay.
But again, it's only goes probably to you can't see past the corner, obviously, as you go all the way across.
The brazier, it exits out the brazier room, and I think then there was a corner.
It goes 40 feet past the brazier room, and then makes a 90 left turn,
right.
90 degrees.
Okay, so we're going to proceed cautiously and as quietly as possible up to the brazier room.
Okay.
To confirm that these 2 goblins are the ones we slayed and are...
Yes, you confirm that they are the ones you've slain. Okay. As you look by, they are definitely dead, as far as you can tell, unless you're going to check them.
Okay. So get up to them, and I'm gonna creep on down the 40 feet.
Okay.
I say, John, you stay here, watch the way we came, yell. If anything, I tell him to hide behind these 2 goblins. So if anyone comes, you can hide behind the goblins. And then if anyone's coming, come running to me and let me know.
Okay.
And Glade is going to creep quietly down the 40-foot passage and listen to see if any can hear anything Because I think, if I recall correctly, the hobgoblin room was not too far away.
You make the left, and it's 20. You recall it's 20 feet, and then the room is.
Right. So that's what Glade is going to do.
Okay.
He's taking on Pixie's role since Pixie's not here.
Right. So he starts. He creeps down the hallway, and just as she remembers, I think there is a. You
oh
hear the click,
yeah.
And you have to roll a 20-sided dice.
That's right. I did forget about that. An 8.
Okay, you are successful in not taking full damage.
Right.
You take 2 points of damage.
Yeah, so did not learn that lesson. That's true.
And you hear, "Hey, are you okay?"
So I speak.
John was behind you. John is saying, "Hey, are you okay? What happened?"
Yes, I'm okay. Just stay there. I triggered a trap again. Second time.
It's the third time.
Is it a third?
You Glade hit Pixie hit it one time. Pixie hit it first and then hit you. Then on the way back you hit it, but you escaped being hit. And then the third time, So
yeah, well, it's very successful.
Right. I stand back. That is a mistake. You are
How light now? I think I'm 100.
Well, now you're 100 because you're wearing armor. You were 86 pounds.
That's right, 88.
88 pounds. That's right. But
John, are you working for the goblins? I gotta admit, this adventure is more intrigue than I had thought. I'd never suspected John was working for the guy. It's all a big ruse. The daughter is working. Alyssa's working for the goblins.
She's actually in the back smoking.
Yes.
She's not even there.
I've really been taken.
Nothing. It's like the Wicker Man, right?
Yeah.
Where they bring the people in to actually sacrifice. This would be a great change. When we talk about the module, I'll have to post that because that would be hilarious. Anyway.
James says, a little bit of combat. It'd be simple. Okay.
So that's right. I had made a mistake last time, and I actually posted on GROGTALK that Pixie is the one over 100 pounds. Glade is 86 pounds, but you've just added armor, which is 15 pounds,
right.
So now you're 101 pounds.
Appreciate that.
Sorry about that. So this I almost messed up, but no, you didn't get damaged. So
I grab my side to stop the bleeding.
Okay.
And now
you notice
listen.
And now you notice the scythe is slowly retracting.
I pay careful attention to where the scythe was.
Okay.
And I say, John, try to help me remember. For if there is an episode 5, that there's a scythe.
Episode 6.
6. That there's a scythe here.
Okay. All right.
Great. And now I listen.
Well, you don't have to listen very long when you heard, "Hey, I think they're coming." What's that? That's them. You hear some commotion.
So what I do is, in Goblin, I yell, and I try to do a Goblin voice.
Okay.
I don't know if it's guttural or... I say, "Yes, they're injured. The scythe got one. We got him. Hurry, quick, to the brazier." And I go running back.
Okay.
And as I say that, I'm going to run back, and I'm going to tell John to get on either side
of the brazier.
And let me tell you my plan.
Okay.
As I hear people coming...
Does it really matter what your plan is?
No.
It's going to fail hard. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Please, let me know what your...
As I hear people coming, I'm going to then yell in Goblin, look into this brazier. What is this? Because, they're looking...
Right. Okay. So I'm going to give a reaction roll.
And John, get the net ready.
I'm going to give them a reaction roll and see if they are believable. What's your charisma?
It's a 9.
It's a 9. Okay. Well, so let's just
find out.
For argument's sake, for those playing at home, I rolled very high, so that would be favorable. That I'm just going to say that they believe that it's a goblin talking. So the one goes, "Hey, I hear them. Let's go get them." And you hear 2 footsteps, and the hobgoblin's like, "No, it's a trap," or something to that effect. But the 2 goblins, you see them coming around as you are on the sides of that.
And and as you remember, I in Goblin from around the corner say, "Oh, look in this brazier. What is this? Come here."
Okay.
And then
So as you're on the sides of the brazier, right, John?
No, we're right on the corner of the opening.
I got
So
you.
as they walk through,
Right.
John throws a net, and I try and
Okay. What are you gonna do? What is Glade gonna do when they run by?
Well, the minute so hopefully at the net, he's going to try to attack from behind.
Well, he's got a sack. He doesn't have a net.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't a net. It's a sack. So, all right. So, this may not go so well. So, I say I'm gonna wave over to John as they're coming and say.
Okay. Okay. So he gets his All right. So
and I'm gonna wait for them to come and try to get an attack on their back.
Okay. Great. So it will be. We're gonna roll for surprise because we don't know exactly when they're gonna run past.
Okay.
But I'm gonna give you advantage. So roll d6.
Okay. I've rolled a 3.
So you are not surprised. They are not surprised. But they are going to run past you. So whatever happens in initiative, even if they win initiative, your attack will be from the rear.
Okay.
So let's roll initiative.
Okay. I'm hoping they fall in the brazier.
5.
4.
Okay. So they run past you. And you take your opportunity attacks, and then they will turn around and they will attack you.
And can you explain an opportunity attack?
So yes, an opportunity attack is when a creature who's engaged in combat runs away from someone, flees from the battle. Basically, they're turning and running. The idea is, if Dan and I were fighting, we're watching each other and we're guarding and parrying. But if I decide this is not going well, I turn around and run, then that gives a free attack with a lot of advantage to Dan. So what I'm basically saying is because the goblins ran past, even though they won initiative, they're going to run past to the brazier. And as they're turning, they're going to realize that there are some enemies there. They're going to get the attack, and then they're going to attack. I could also argue that they stop early and they kind of stop, but we're going to do it this way. Okay, so this is your attack.
Yep. So this will be Glade.
Okay.
A 7.
7 will not hit, even with a +4, if I'm pretty sure. They are AC 6, which armor class is 6. You don't have any other pluses, correct?
I do not.
Yes, you needed a 14, so you needed a 10.
Okay, so now John.
You're going to roll for John?
John the blacksmith.
Okay, John the blacksmith.
It'd be great if he was the hero, wouldn't it?
It would be the hero.
I would just take him on. He would then train to become a fighter.
Right.
All right, let's see how you... A 3.
3, no.
You have to admit...
These are the white dice.
I know players often say this, and I always say, give me a break.
Yeah.
But I do feel like my roles have been pretty terrible.
Yes.
Right?
These are horrible. So they come around and they go, oh, wow, you're attacking us. So, of course... one attacks Glade. 16. That's probably a hit, but it may be a miss. Because what's your armor class now? 5?
5.
So fortunately, against armor class 5, they're up to they're 1.1. I'm sorry, up to 1.1. 1.1 is 15. So yes, they hit. And against John, they miss John. So that's good.
Okay, now against Glade, I see.
Yes. So you take 4 hit points of damage.
Okay. So I'm down to a
exciting 1.
To a 1.
Okay. So now it's initiative. How's this plan feeling?
Well, I think the plan was okay. I think the dice were terrible.
Yeah, and that's it. That's there's a thing in the Dungeon Master. Sometimes you best play plans and it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, actually with the way my dice are rolling, it makes me feel better actually about last session, realizing now there really isn't anything I could have done with these dice. I mean, it would have helped if I had not set off the trap again.
Right.
But it just would have been a later death, I think.
Right. All right. Well, I rolled a 1 for initiative.
Okay. I have a 3.
So, okay, so you again have another opportunity to strike these.
All right, I'm sticking with these dice. So I'm going to go with Glade first. It's an 8.
8. That's a miss, because now it's normal attacks.
John, it's a 2.
Okay. So this is against Glade. 6 is a miss.
Why does God hate me?
You mean the gods here? Oh, why is your god, the hunter god?
No,
she was with he or she.
I haven't prayed. That's it. I think it's a he.
It's a he.
I didn't pray, did I?
No, you haven't since the first time. And if you recall in episode 3,
yes,
I think, or episode 2, when you were creating Glade, episode 1 actually, that you were going to be very focused on this, and you really didn't like that other players don't take. I
was a big talker.
Right,
and then not only did I not pray, I forgot I was a cleric.
You were converted and you had full of zeal, and then you went from that to.
I think DMs should be required to play every now and then. It'll make them more forgiving of their own players.
I was just thinking about that after yesterday because. So let's see. 14. I think, what did I say he needed? AC 5. He missed. So that's good. He missed.
Yeah.
All right, so now it's initiative.
You say that it's so surprising. Look, it's true.
It's true, he missed.
He actually missed.
By the way, it's also important as a DM to keep track of how many rounds. So this is now the 3rd round.
Oh.
Because other things could happen. We do recall there's a hobgoblin. What will the hobgoblin do? Maybe there's other creatures. There's a combat going on. As you get later in adventures, spells have duration. They're not permanent, so they tend to run out. So it's very important to keep track of time in the dungeon. We talked about that a little bit first, but that's part of bringing your dungeon to life and your world to life. There has to be all these things that cause verisimilitude, or whatever it's called, the suspension of reality, and allow people to truly believe. Like the fact that he didn't pray to his deity, which is why his dice are not working.
Right. Okay.
So now it's initiative.
So should my action this round be to pray? This.
Maybe you can pray while fighting.
I gotta.
You do have a hunter. All right, ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
2.
6.
All right, so you've won initiative.
It ends
again.
now.
Okay.
That's what he says as he's attacking.
She.
Glade, thank you. Glade or John.
He may attack you.
John, yes, John is going to join the goblins. I'm with you. I brought him to you.
Sacrifice.
Yes.
Sacrifice her. You just needed a female.
Yes, I brought a trade.
That's right.
I will trade this pathetic half elf.
Heathen half elf doesn't pray. That's
For this woman. All right.
Exactly.
All right. So here comes Glade. It ends now. A 5.
That's a miss.
John. Okay, John.
Have you rolled above a 10?
I don't think I've seen double digits.
Yeah.
I've heard of an 8.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is against Glade. 11. That's a miss. 10. Okay. By the way, this is first edition.
This may go on forever. I don't know if there's any Buffy the Vampire Slayers out there, but this reminds me there was a fight with Xander and Harmony, and they're just kind of slapping at each other. This is, I think.
All right. So this is now the 4th round of combat.
Okay. 4.
6. All right. Let's see. Against Glade. 5.
Yeah.
Against John. 6.
It's rubbing off on them.
They're actually holding back.
They're like, we're getting worse fighting these guys. Our skills are going down.
It even says we're supposed to be dead by 3 turns.
Wait, is that what it says on them or us?
Both.
Okay, ready? I'm attacking. It ends.
We're extras, right? We're like the stormtroopers. We're supposed to be shot.
Yes. Okay, so I'm yelling. I'm serious. Now it ends.
Okay.
Here it is.
They're not even moving anymore because they may be easier for them to hit.
Who trained me? I want a refund. There's a lawsuit. There is a lawsuit at the end of this. If I die, it's going to be the estate of versus.
That's right.
All right. It's a 4. It's a 7. Where did this dice come from?
All right, now it's the 5th round. Right, it's the 5th round.
It's like a heavyweight boxing match. It's 15 rounds. We're just sort of
6.
We're sparring.
Oh my goodness.
It's a 4.
4. This is against John. 11. Okay.
The worst podcast ever.
2 hours.
2 hours later.
2 hours later. That's right.
I'm attacking, right?
Bob, that's right.
It's a 5. Glade will always go first, unless I say otherwise. John. It's a 15.
That is a hit.
John is like enough already. Yeah.
Right.
Did like a goblin accidentally walk into his swing? Is that what it was?
No, but he does hit him, but he's using a sword, so it's just a long sword damage.
So the long sword is
D8.
a D8, but that's pretty good. That's not bad. 8.
8. Oh, that was. He just finally after 5. He says it's now.
Yes.
I'm ending this.
Does the head fly into the brazier, perhaps?
I'll roll a d6. 1 and 6, it falls in there.
Oh, okay. 4 now.
Let's see. Roll d8. We'll see which way I'll say the heads came off.
It's probably gonna hit Glade.
So it goes back. Well, it goes backward, but it actually sails over the brazier.
Nice.
So he kind of slices and it kind of hits like a baseball shot.
What was that movie that they go in the?
Yeah, he just kind of tosses out. 2001 with the bones flying.
Like the heads flying.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that was good.
Now this is usually what players like to do at this point. They like to say something like, Now, when the head gets cut off and goes flying to the air, does the other goblin watch it and just stand there? And can I have an opportunity attack, please?
No.
Okay. And that's usually what the DM says.
Right, because actually he's focused on the fact the ranger, who's trained at killing goblins and those type, has gone 5 rounds and not even come close to it.
Yeah, that was John. Was that John?
John.
That was John, wasn't it? Yeah.
John, the
Yeah.
the blacksmith.
In quotes.
No, he's a blacksmith.
Okay, he's
just fighting at the problem with it is that this is what he needs to hit, and this is what Glade needs to hit.
Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. And so 18 for John, he would hit what 3 times out of 20, I think, and
right.
Glade needs a 14, so he would obviously hit 1 time out of 20. Okay, let's do it.
All right. So now it's that the monsters went and missed. You guys hit and missed, and now it's initiative.
Okay. 3.
1.
Oh,
all right. So in the 6th round.
Round 6.
Round 6.
Glade's going out.
That's right.
Going back out there. 16.
That's a hit.
He watched. He's like, that's how are you holding that? Show me.
That's pretty good.
He had it the wrong way. Aaron Cameron, though Aaron Cameron's pretty good. I think
That's
he
right.
batted. He put his arms the wrong way.
The other way, opposite, right?
But obviously, he was quite successful. All right. So, what does Glade have? Glade has a.
I assume it's a long sword.
I think it's a long sword.
That's right.
That's
a D8.
It's a D8. That's right.
That's a D10.
Oh, sorry. All right, you caught me. All right.
So I have to watch.
He's always watching me like a hawk.
5. That was, and because you're a ranger, I recall.
Plus 1 damage, right?
That's good because
giant class characters.
That's how many hit points you have.
All right.
So you finally, after recognizing that everyone's getting tired, you stab the goblin. Who goes, finally, you've released me from this burden of waiting for death.
Glad to be of help, I say.
Okay. So as you fall, you don't hear anything after that.
So, in Goblin, I'm going to yell down the hallway, "We got him, boss!"
Okay. Come any closer, I'll kill her. You're a liar.
Now I do. Now here's
You're a bad fighter, and you're a liar.
John. So Glade starts walking down the hallway, and John says, "There's a trap! Don't go any further!" And Glade stops.
That's right.
And starts backing up. Okay. So, Glade says to John, did we see, I can't remember how much of a look we got in that room, but last time, did we notice anybody other than the hobgoblin and the
besides
two
Alyssa?
goblins, besides Alyssa?
You did not see anyone more.
Okay. I say,
in your waiting for death and running, you recognize that the room was about 40 by 30. There was a statue in the back. There appeared to be no other way out.
Okay. And where was the hobgoblin standing and Alyssa? I mean, I understand they may not be in the same place.
He was near the statue and Alyssa was in the corner. There was a statue back there.
Okay. So I say to John, I have a bow. I believe I have a bow.
Yes.
I have a short bow.
Right, with 18 arrows that you did not have originally that we adjudicated that you did have. So.
Thank you. Now this often happens too. I'm not a big fan of players doing this. If you've got an NPC line, so Glade says to John, do you have any ideas? Which is basically, I'm not going to do that actually, which is basically asking the DM for help. But so Glade is going to say, John, nice work. I'm glad I was able to soften them up for you for that death blow that you did.
Where is my daughter?
Okay, she's right down around the corner, but please.
Well, let's go.
No, stop.
Now.
Stop.
He starts moving forward.
He said, stop. I tag him. I said, number 1, there's a trap right down there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes. Glad somebody remembered.
That's right.
Ow. My side hurts for some reason. Number 2,
and you have a ding in your head from the goblin who clubbed you.
Yeah, I'm a mess. I say, John, I have a bow. I will try to get a shot at him. If we charge, he may simply kill her. Let me take a shot with my arrows.
Oh.
Now, what does he say?
I'll give a reaction.
He immediately attacks me.
Yes, poor reaction. He decides you're worse than the goblins.
I'm a liability.
That's right.
Better dead.
You're going to ruin the mission. The mission's going to fail because of you.
She will definitely die.
Okay, so yes, So I will wait for you to shoot, and then I will run in and save my daughter.
Yeah.
Save my daughter.
Okay, that is fine, but please let me try 2 shots first.
Because I have exceptional skills.
You
I'm a man of many talents. I'm trying to do the taken thing. Sorry.
Okay. So so I'm gonna peek around the corner.
Okay.
And what do I see?
You see from around the corner. You don't see anything because from your vantage point. And by the way, you didn't say you were trying to avoid the trap.
Oh.
So roll a dex check.
20. Now I get the 20.
You take 1 hit point of damage.
He's out. It's down to John.
So, so you collapse. John looks at you and goes. So he immediately after that he figures he puts he takes the bag and grabs the scythe and tries to keep it from. Actually, let's see. He'll give him a strength check. Yes, he actually snaps. Snaps the scythe off. And he quickly binds you as well because I'll have to do this alone. So you want to continue to play John like you wanted the last time?
Yeah.
So now you're in the mind of John. I guess you, as I transfer this over to you, you are completely befuddled in the fact that 2 adventurers have somehow I have to rescue 3 people now.
Well, this is my daughter.
Right.
So I got to. So John is going to pray to his deity. He's going to say a little prayer. I don't know the blacksmith deity.
That's right. Yeah, it's the
Can I roll a percentile if I get a 1?
Yeah, 1%. Less than 10%, you would get some kind of
small animal.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Oh well, you'll decide, right?
Right.
90.
90.
There's a lightning bolt.
Silence. The
There's
void.
no thunder.
All he senses the void is coming for him. He senses God is.
My God has forsaken me.
Apparently, all this area is full of death and destruction.
Yeah. Okay. So what he's gonna do is he's gonna. Well, he knows he's there. The hobgoblin knows he's there.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to yell to the hobgoblin. He's going to try to parlay.
Okay. So let's roll 3d6 to see what his charisma is, since I have no idea.
7.
He's a homely fellow.
Well, that doesn't mean okay.
He's a
good personality. Everyone says he has a good.
Well, he's not. It's not about his attractiveness. He's just a very common man. He's not a. That's why he's a blacksmith.
But so if I'm not very attractive, my recollection.
You're not attractive. You're just not. You're not very charismatic.
Oh, because when you said I wasn't attractive, I was going to say, well, because when people try to set me up on dates, they would always describe me as having a good personality.
Right. No.
But that's not the case.
He's a gruff blacksmith.
Okay.
But you can try.
Okay.
You're going to try to parlay with the...
Yes.
Okay.
Surrender now, hobgoblin.
Okay.
We have killed your 2. We have killed your 4. I change it. Your 2. Your 4. Guards.
I give you 15. No, 10 commandments.
You know what he's going to do?
Mm-hmm.
He's going to go back and get the head, and he's going to roll the goblin head down the corridor.
Okay.
And say, there are many of us. And I do different voices. Yes, get the goblin head. And he's doing a lot of different voices.
Make your intelligence. Give me an intelligence and wisdom. Roll 3d6 for
me. God, right, to figure out what it is for this character.
This is an intelligence.
10.
10, and then for wisdom.
So that's 100 IQ. That's not terrible. Yeah. Come on. 13 wisdom.
Yeah, he doesn't think trying different voices is probably a wise idea. He should just stick with plan A.
This is the DM helping me.
Yeah, this is because he realizes that, because because I didn't react to it. You roll the head in and he says this.
And I do say there are many of us. So we have slain.
What do you want?
Release the girl, and we shall not come in there and kill you.
Okay.
Send her out.
Come in here, I'll kill her. All right, so you try to. You promise to leave.
If you release the girl.
We will release the girl, but we get to keep the one that's here.
That is acceptable.
Right.
I don't think John would. John wants his daughter safe.
Yeah, he's neutral.
Release the girl.
Okay.
And you may have Trixie.
Trixie.
He messed up his name.
Okay.
Well, I figured if you I figured other people would,
Right. So you notice that you hear some shuffling, and you see what is John, where is John looking down the hallway?
Yes, he would be poking around the corner.
Okay, so he looks down and he notices Alyssa is moving forward. She's tied currently to a rope. We're gonna go outside.
Who's we? Is there someone?
I'm taking the girl outside. If anyone attacks me, you're dead. She's dead.
Just send the girl.
You're not coming in here, right?
Right.
He's speaking in his broken common. Okay, so he said, and he pushes Alyssa and says, "Get out of here."
Okay. Does Alyssa
Oh yeah, she
come
is.
running?
That's right.
I get out of there.
Father.
Yeah.
That's right. So now we have to. So John embraces. So John has no moral quandary. He's just going to take Alyssa and head on out.
Oh, there's an unconscious. No, he's going to grab. He would,
Okay.
He would try, but that's kind of, I don't know. Can I live with Alyssa's help? Drag him out of there?
Yeah, Alyssa's a stronger for a small waify thing. Is actually she's a peasant girl. She pulls her weight around. So yeah, she's more than capable of. He's only 86 pounds. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. They'll grab poor Glade.
Okay.
Carry Glade out of there.
All right. So you successfully pull out Glade, and of course, without attention, what happens on the 0 rule? Because Glade went to 0, what happens?
Well, so he needs to be bound, right? So
they bound him.
He would be okay. So he's unconscious. He's not losing any more hit points, but he of course is going to need to be healed.
Right.
And so obviously when we got back to this little village, hopefully there would be they would need to find a cleric somehow. No cleric in this town?
Not really. Just you basically have to wait to.
Well, John doesn't have a lot of money, I don't think.
No, he's gonna hold you up in his room.
Well, I mean, it's not a charity. I'm not a hostel. Says John.
Well, the next morning, Glades would awaken because she was at 0 hit points, but will not be able to adventure for a week if you go down to 0 hit points. Not be able to adventure.
I never really thought about that because usually always the characters when they hit 0, someone's going to do cure light wounds and they come. But I guess so at some point in time. Well, I was wondering if I was going to remain in just a.
No, unfortunately, as we had in the last session, if you get to 0 or less, and then after you come back.
Yeah, I didn't know I would come back without a cure light wound. So, but
yes, yeah, that's 0 hit point. Well, basically overnight you rest.
And that's true. I'd get the hit point.
You get your hit point.
That's true. I'd get the hit point.
So so what happens is I'll say that John brings both of you back. He has some conscience, and in the morning, Glade wakes up, feels horrible, like she's been in a combat, that she's been scythed a few times. She's despondent with herself because she has failed to be a good acolyte, and will be very ill for a week as she recovers from this traumatic experience.
Yeah, and I assume, right? So she'll live, which is good. I assume Pixie.
Well, we don't know what's going to happen. So what do you do? So after a week of resting and convalescing, what does Glades do? You're back at full hit points now.
Seeks a party of adventurers. Offers a reward for the rescue.
You're not going to try to go back
basically,
what happened?
Glade becomes that beginning part for other parties. So you are approached you are in a tavern.
Right.
And a half-elf approaches you and says, "Please, you must help me. My pixie, my dear friend has been taken. I offer a reward.
Right.
I have not much money."
So, after a week, you're able to then go back to the tavern, and unfortunately, you realize that this probably wasn't the best place to come because no one comes by this area. So, after a couple of days of hanging out in the tavern, and are you going to compensate John for his kindness? Because he's not feeling like he should provide you. By the way, he took his chainmail back.
Yeah. I'll give him 2 gold pieces for his hospitality.
Oh, very well. Thank you again for your help. I'm glad at least you found Alyssa.
So she was saved. So yes, what is the reward?
I thought that was your friend who kept asking for rewards. In fact, I remember you saying there is no need for rewards, sir. Doing good was best.
I see. So that's
you must be channeling Pixie. You must be distraught. So he counsels you. He's very concerned. You're not acting the same. When you first met, you were full of kindness and goodness, and now you're not praying to a deity.
Yeah, that's what happens. It changes quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I would give you anything. So he hands you back the chain shirt, and he fashions you a helmet as well. So you do receive that.
Oh, thank you, John. So
Alyssa talked to me, and even though I thought you don't deserve anything, but she said it would be best. She was appreciative of that.
Okay.
And you notice she's in the back whittling figurines.
No. There's not. No. Well, I mean, I could just settle down here. It's, retire, and it's a nice place. And no, are you kidding me? It's like, how many people live in this place? It seems like the goblin to person ratio is.
It's a hamlet. Well, there's probably 6 or 7 buildings total in this hamlet.
Great.
Most people.
So there probably is a higher population of goblins. So all right, no, I don't like this place at all.
You were traversing through.
I'm moving on.
Okay.
I'm moving on. Look, I just met Pixie. I did my best. Pixie's probably dead. I know there's no one else here to go in. If I go in, I can't take on. I'm not going to be able to take on a hobgoblin very well. I'm going to pray to my deity, and unless I get a sense that my deity tells me differently, I'm going to keep moving on.
All right, very good. I think that would be a good time to then end this session, where at least Alyssa was saved from that, and one of the characters, Glade, will continue. What happened to Pixie? We're not sure. What other mysteries were in the dungeon? We're not sure about that too. So this will end this part of it, and then we'll have to decide with Dan during the week. Because again, I think we like this little playing because you get to learn scenarios and this and that, and hopefully you guys can comment if this is something you're interested in. But we played for about 45 minutes, so this will be a good time to stop this part.
Well, you're having fun.
This is almost as fun as last night, where we survived that craziness. This was the opposite of that. So, okay. So just a couple of things. So the dungeon. Do you want to know? Well, because this is for educational purposes. So I got this dungeon from, it's the Delian Tomb, and there's only one more room that Dan's character does not go through. It was built by Matt Colville, who's a YouTube advocate for D&D, great guy. I'll put a link for him. So if you're a beginning DM and you don't, as you saw, this took about 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours of time. That's one session. If you were to do this in one time, you do 3 or 4 hours, and you play. It's relatively simple. I would certainly encourage anyone to do it. And basically, so some of the things I had to do is I had to have a setup where John, that was interesting. We'll talk about that during social encounters. The more prep time, as Dan said, the more fleshed out this would be. And it was a good adventure. And now there are hooks that, as a dungeon master, I have to decide what happened to Pixie. Maybe in Glade's travails, she finds some information that Pixie's still alive. That's the classic thing where a couple gets split and something happens to the other person and finds out later. I could have that in the next session or 3 or 4 sessions. Why was Alyssa captured? We still don't know that reason. So there's a lot of things we could plug into. So as a dungeon master, it's always good to kind of somewhat get an idea from the players. But what Glades is going to do is she's going to look for some other adventures to party on. She's leaving this hamlet and moving on to bigger pastures.
She wants a larger party.
Okay, very good. Okay, great. Well, and Dan, any other questions for this part?
Nope. That was fun.
All right, this has been a lot of fun so far.
All right.
Very good. So now we're in our next segment called Word of Recall. And Word of Recall is about interactions with NPCs. We're talking about encounters, and it's a core part of the game. So, Dan, maybe you can describe what encounters are, how you've handled them briefly, and why they can either be a very fun component or sometimes not so fun from a DM perspective.
Sure. So the Dungeon Master, I think, has a difficult job, whereas a player character usually only has to play one character. And the DM, of course, has to play everybody other than the player characters,
right,
which includes all NPCs. NPC means non-player character. So, in the game session we just had, that up until disaster struck, that would have been John,
right,
the blacksmith, and of course Alyssa. And in addition to that, has to play the role of any monsters, like the goblins in the last adventure. And that it can be difficult, but it can also be very enjoyable. So you've got to get into the minds of all these different characters and play them.
Right. And I think the people who embrace being a dungeon master or running the game, they must, at least to some extent, like that interaction. That's the benefit of running it, is that you're always part of the game. There's no time off, quote unquote, first air quote for the podcast, where you can just sit back and not do anything. You're always having to engage. So I think those who gravitate towards that is because they want to know what's going on. They like building worlds or being part of it and being part of that action. So, but as Dan said, it's a lot of work, and it does require some improvisational skills, and that comes over time. Sometimes, you can be very matter of fact, or other times. So here's our sheet. You can hold on to that.
Yep, thank you.
So, and in fact, back in the Dungeon Master's Guide, right, page 102, 103, Gary Gygax talks about the role of the Dungeon Master. So first thing I would suggest, it's interesting, when I got back into the hobby a few years ago, and now I've listened to a lot of podcasts, and we've gone over 40 years plus of Dungeons and Dragons. All the things, by the time the Dungeon Masters came out, Dungeon Master's Guide came out in 1979, most of the things were already thought of as far as how to play, the challenges you will have. I sometimes listen to these other podcasts or go on websites and talks about that these are new developments. After a few years, once the game went from being a hobby that people just did in their own to being a professional product, and even still it would be refined, the basic things are. So again, I wanted to, as the DM, you are the moderator, judge, jury, and supreme deity. I love that. You're actively engaged in role-playing throughout the course of the campaign, from game to game. So you've got to deal with different roles. And so he gives some great guidance on what you have to do and how you provide flavor to the game. And the basic advice he gives is, what would a rational person do who's looking out for their self-interest? That's what he basically has in the description.
And I'd like to mention, because I think that's absolutely right. I think what's fun too, though, is to take into account the intelligence of the monster, right? So, last night, as there's a hill giant, there's an etnin, and they have low intelligence. So it's a challenge to play those creatures, those monsters, in a way where it is about their self-interest, but also if they're not very intelligent, to play them not very intelligent, and then to play a character who is or a monster that is very intelligent.
Yeah.
And so so you can't just play them all like, oh, they have my intelligence. Right. You've got to adjust that.
So setting up NPCs is a lot of work for a dungeon master, and I would say unless, as a beginning dungeon master, the more you can do, that's the part that's probably going to be the most challenging, besides rule adjudication, as far as if they do something, you're not exactly clear what the rule is. So how much detail, Dan, do you put in when you're setting up your NPC? Do you usually play, you like to run modules from the past, you read them, do you do any more work on that? So what's your approach to doing that?
So it depends how much, as it often is, it depends how much time I have.
Yeah.
So...
This is not your number one thing? Getting ready for us Friday?
Well, actually it is.
Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
Should it be?
Okay.
But an adventure can have many NPCs.
Right.
So, for example, I'm a big fan of the Halls of Tyson Thane. And there are, it'll be like, okay, or, I just ran Morkindane. These will have, like, well, there's 12 bandits or 18 bandits. And if you really wanted to, you could have personalities drawn up for every one of those. And that can help. So, for example, I think if I recall correctly, and I would say Tyson Thane, it could be Tizen Thane, but in Tyson Thane, I believe you guys started talking to one of the NPCs, you had this interaction.
We talked to the Goblin Ambassador, one of the goblins.
You talked to one of the goblins, you talked to this one guy, because I think there was one guy who gave you a note, and if you know about their background, that's really helpful with that interaction. But the problem is if you don't know who the party's going to talk to, and you've got 20 bandits,
right,
having personalities for 20 bandits is, maybe it makes more sense to just have a personality for a couple and then use those. I'm sure there's tricks of the trade that I haven't learned yet. But so, the answer to your question is, how much time do I have? If I've got a lot of time and I'm really interested in the adventure and I think there's a real chance for intrigue, I will spend more time on it. If I think it's more just going to be a hack and slash, not so much. So it really depends. I think one of the things that you have to be okay with as a DM is understanding that you may put in a lot of work into the NPCs, and they never. It's kind of like in a movie where you act in a movie your little part, and it's on the cutting room floor,
right,
and you never make it in there. So I think you need to be aware of a lot of work might end up being for naught, but a lot of work might turn out to make a great difference in a game, in a situation. So it depends. I tend not to do a ton. I tend to have a sort of in the back of my head a general idea of what the personalities are like of the main characters, the lower NPCs. In all honesty, I would probably tend to wing it.
Yeah, and to dovetail on that, how much detail was really, is this a one shot or is this a campaign? And then the second thing, a lot of advice, which I agree with, and I should do a better job being more organized, is, I use on the tablet OneNote to keep track of things, but a lot of people use flashcards or index cards. You should never waste anything you have, because unlike a movie where it goes on the cutting room floor, the players don't know it's on the cutting room floor. They don't know that they never met Bob the bandit number 17. In fact, you should just do 2 bandits, and because usually they're only going to capture 1 or 2 of them. So whoever, no matter if you name them or label them, they'll always be those 2. Whoever 2 bandits they capture, those will be the 2 that they talk to. And as the more you start building up your repertoire of personalities and things and feelings of what these folks are. So you start with the creature type, their alignment, their intelligence, and most of the time in the monster manual they have a description of their attitude and how they think. And so those are the kind of things you would look at. So kind of playing the NPC. One of the things, Dan, do you try to do accents and mannerisms, right? That kind of rolls into the whole role playing, which we'll talk about.
Right, and if I can mention real quick, I believe somewhere in the DMG there is characters for NPCs to do it randomly, and I've used that before, and that can be a lot of fun because you never know what you're going to get. I try to do accents and mannerisms. I don't know if I think some players probably like it more than others. So as you know, with combat, I try to make it colorful and describe what's happening, and I saw online some people don't like that. Right. I think it can be overdone and they don't like it, and so I try to always do mannerisms, try to speak like they're speaking, and I can tell you where I got that from was about 2 years ago when I decided to start playing again, and I knew I was going to have to DM a game. To get the group together, I decided to run B2, Keep on the Borderlands, and I believe in Keeping the Borderlands, Gary Gygax talks about how you should DM the game. And he talked about you should, not only do you talk about what you've already mentioned, which is play the monsters intelligently, but you should also do voices. And so I read that, and hey, it's Gary Gygax saying it. Right. So the answer to your question is, yes, I try to do accents and mannerisms. I don't know if it bothers some players or not.
Yeah, and you got to. This goes back to reading your room and the kind of players you have. I think first edition, because it was still a new thing. We talked about what did we talk about just before we started? That you had not played that way. What was the thing? Oh, hiring henchmen and hirelings. We'll talk about. You know, we pre-internet, we all kind of figured the game out based on who we started with. Someone got the books at some point. They kind of guessed what the game was, or they played with someone else. And you have this iteration, this of a permutation of D&D that you started to learn. So it's when you've cross-pollinated, when you've gone to conventions, or you go now with the internet, you start realizing there's other things. So one of the things I wrote down is the attack of the monologue, and this is something as a player people don't like. So you know, I didn't talk to Dan about this, but what do you think attack of the monologue is?
I assume what attack of the monologue is, you're describing a DM who is, I could be wrong on this, but the DM who is giving a very long explanation, having an NPC. So the king has brought you for this mission, and 20 minutes later the king has stopped talking to the party. And the DM is reading, which this is hard because I read too, oftentimes, because you don't want to forget things when you don't read.
Right.
You know, I remember one time in one of these adventures, I was like, oh yeah, and I forgot to tell you that there's the brazier with blood in the, or whatever, there's the thing.
We're like, what?
Because what I was trying to do, right, and you know, then you look terrible, but what, you know, what I was trying to do is try to have more just explaining, as opposed to sitting there and reading, and you enter the room, you see this, and this, and so I understand why there's a temptation to read, because you want to make sure you don't miss anything. In the same vein, if it gets too long, people sort of check. I think they start to check out.
Yes.
I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yes. And if I offend anyone, then that's fine. Especially when we were younger, part of being the dungeon master is, like you said, you prepare. But you're thinking about your world, what the players are going to do. You become invested in the story that you're building. But it's not just your story. You're setting up the world, and the players have to interact. And the game should be about the players, with you as facilitating that, and your enjoyment should be the interaction and seeing how the story unfolds. When you do a giant monologue, because you've spent days and days of figuring out all the history and the background, and as Dan said, the king stands up 4,000 years ago, my great-grandfathers who fought the orc horde, and then in 2005, and he goes through this whole history. And none of it is relevant to the players. They just want to know, we have to go to the caves and save the princess from that thing. So it's finding that fine line. I think one of the best advice is you don't have to explain everything. You can sometimes just say something, and players, if they're interested, they'll ask you about it. You could say, you know, during the great hobgoblin invasion, the artifact was lost. And they could ask, hey, what is the hobgoblin invasion? You don't have to sit here and explain that Prince Ararak attacked and defeated the goblin horde and blah, 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 blah. So allow your world to kind of flesh out as they talk about it, as opposed to monologuing, because players, no one likes to hear that. It's unfortunately, your players are not as invested as you are in your world.
And I'd like to comment on that, because I think that's also something important for players to remember, is that if they're not as invested as the DM, they should have a little bit of investment. So, you know, so in other words, so the DM has worked really hard on the backstory. You know, if the DM is going to sort of shorten that and not have the big long monologue,
I'm gonna steal this for a second. Keep going.
You're obviously hoping that the players will be taking some notes too, and care about the backstory, and particularly if it's a campaign. Because if it's a campaign, as opposed to a series of one-shots, I assume that the DM is hoping to have that backstory become it may not be relevant for that adventure, but it's going to become relevant down the road. So I think, you know, I guess it's sort of meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
DM, don't overdo it. Player characters, if you send, so we talk a lot about how the DM needs to read the table. I think the players too should read the DM to an extent, right? And if the DM seems to be very interested in this, you know, have some interest and write down the names. I mean, I know you're very good at that. If I recall correct, I think you write down. I was taking notes.
Right.
And so it can be a little discouraging for a DM. I mean, it is for me. I mean, you can comment on this. If that you talked about this backstory, and then it's like, well, wait, what?
Right.
Who did what? Why are we searching?
Why are we here?
Why is this artifact important? And so yeah.
And some of it's not the DM's fault. Sometimes, like yesterday's session, we had new players and other things going on, and sometimes you forget what's going on. The players,
sure.
And we have the situation. We play every other week, and it's hard to remember. 2 weeks have gone by. And so people are like, what did we do?
I ask you guys,
right.
Where were we? What happened?
What did you guys do?
It's hard.
So, depending on the logistics, it's taking notes. So players should be taking notes because that shows the least investment. One of the things is PC expectations, and as a DM, you should be setting them early and then trying to remind them every once in a while. The age of technology, people have their tablets, and they may have the books on the tablets, and they drift from reading a rule to looking on Facebook, and all of a sudden half the people have checked out. So part of it's engaging. I think this is where, if you have an education background, you have the same challenge. You're trying to teach people material, and some of them want to learn, and some of them don't, and you got to use techniques, asking them direct questions, keeping the thing moving forward to get them to get. So monologuing, I would keep it short. You don't have to explain everything. You can just say things, and if they ask about it, great, they'll write it down or not. So you mentioned about Hill Giant Ettins. Do you treat playing NPCs differently when it's a Ettin versus the town crier or whatever it is?
I don't think I do. So Ettins are people too.
Okay.
Right? And Hill Giants are people too. So
until we slaughter them.
Until they're slaughtered. So other than the fact that oftentimes these creatures have low intelligence, so obviously you got to adjust for that, and you got to adjust for alignment as well. I don't treat them differently. Do you? So it sounds like there might be a difference that I'm not picking up on.
I think there's a little bit, only because monsters tend to become very cookie cutter. An orc is an orc is an orc is an orc. It doesn't have to be, but we tend to relegate them to being the description that's in the monster manual. Whereas a character, there's charts for characters. You can give all personalities, so you have to decide: are you going to give flavor in the world that you're running us through, the city-state of Units of Overlord? There are humanoids, monsters that populate the city, and they act more like characters.
Right.
So the question is, are you going to do that, or are you going to just treat them as generic orc number 57 that you run through?
What I like to do, as you may have noticed, is I like to give the monsters names. So I think as a DM, when I give a name to a monster, that helps me treat that monster as more like an NPC. And so what I do, so if I've got a group of 12 goblins, I'll usually do it like Azag, Bazag, Hazag, do the letters to make it easy. But I give them names, and that helps me then get into the idea that they're not just, monster number 3. I don't like the idea of goblin number 3. I mean, you had skeletons 1, 2, 3, and 4, but they're skeletons. They're mindless. They're mindless, exactly.
Well, some of them have more personality than some of the players we had, based on one of them is more brave than the rest.
That's
of them.
true. Very successful. Yeah.
They ran into combat against 12 ghouls when the rest of us were looking for the exit. They're fearless.
Right.
They're
right.
Great.
So yeah. So I would recommend giving your monsters a name, and I think that helps.
Okay. Yeah, and alignment. We talked about the languages, racial adjustment. These are all tools that can help you when you end up with a situation. So, for instance, the hobgoblin. If the hobgoblin knew that Glades was a half elf, probably I would look up in the player's handbook. There's adjustments that you could look at, and I would use goblin or orc, and I would kind of say, "Oh, they're hated." So that would predispose them. There is racial animosities depending on the type of thing. That can happen in a town. The elf walks into the dwarf bar. It should not be, "Hey, friend." It should be more of the initial time when when the elves meet the dwarves.
Well, I like in last night's game session where the ranger was talking about what's his specialty, and he says, "Well, killing orcs," and then there's a half-orc in the party, and a half-orc turns around, and everyone else is sort of pointing at the half-orc.
He's only half mad.
Oops.
He only hates some half.
Yes.
Right, and alignment is, how, if you know the alignment versus the alignment, because that's your worldview. It's what the character thinks. And languages, you know, Dan and I do an okay job with this, but we certainly could do better. We kind of hand wave, oh, who speaks Goblin? And they, you know, the number of the characters, because their classes, so their races speak Goblin. We allow them to interact with them like it's their first language, as opposed to, you know, you're basically like if I took a what's that, Rosetta Stone Spanish, and then went into Colombia, they're going to know I'm not that, and I'm going to definitely not going to be as fluent as I could be. You could make it that a role. You could have them roll before they start their character, saying, yes, you are, you know, you have an ambassador level or a translator level of a language, or you just know you know conversational Goblin. Where's the town? Where's the people we have to kill? How much money, you know, we're getting, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I think those are areas to help you if you get that situation where, as Dan said, they're fighting 12 goblins. They capture one of the goblins and they say, we interrogate him. Okay, how is he going to be? What are you going to do with that? And then and so one of the challenges we have is that scenario. It happened, and I put, what's the guard's name? You know, you've set up this town, or the town's there, and you know, there's two guards standing in front of the gate, and you just assume the player's going to walk by, and they go, I want to talk to that guard. And they go, hey, I'm the guard. And what's your name? And you're like, I don't know. That's what happened with John. I forgot to give John a name. I gave the daughter a name, but I didn't give John a name. So I had to make one up, and I came up with John, which is horrible. You go out, there's plenty of sites, we'll talk about that in suggestion, where you can come up with names. What's your advice when giving NPC names? Do you have some do's and don'ts when it comes to generating names?
Well, I have do's, but I don't do the do's. So everyone will tell you that you should have a list of names. Yeah. Just a list of names. And so when that happens, I talk to the guard and say, what's your name? You can just look at the list. So it's just a list of names.
And you scratch it off or whatever when you use it, or you write down who it is.
Right. And so, I mean, you can obviously give NPC names in advance. I think that's probably, I guess you should do both. It doesn't take long to give a name. Look, even if it's, John the Blacksmith worked fine. I didn't know you were making up John the Blacksmith because you said it quickly and it was fine. And so I think the key is, as the DM, to not look like you're stumbling and making up the name. So if you can come up with it fast, great. I think what's important is that you do write down the name somewhere. I mean, there's so much you're trying to do as a DM. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to forget about things like, okay, where did I write that name? Because if you come up with John the Blacksmith on the fly, you may forget. If you don't write down John the Blacksmith,
Rufus, bartender, John Blacksmith, Alyssa, daughter.
See, and organization seems to be so important as a DM. Yeah. So that way you've got that continuity. When the adventure starts up next time, you know it was John the Blacksmith, as opposed to, what was that guy's name again?
And have to listen to us over and over again, which is painful enough.
Yeah, I think that coming up with NPC names in advance can be fun.
Right.
Because, first edition AD&D, my recollection is, the names are often kind of silly and entertaining. And so you can have some, so I mean, in the adventure that you guys are going through now, I assigned some names, like the drunken dwarf is Dribbler.
Dribbler, that's good. That's a great name.
Yeah, and so it's a little, and so you kind of remember then when it's Dribbler, people tend to remember it. So that's important. But I think this shows how much work.
Right.
Think about our advice that we're giving to DMs. I might be frightened to be a DM. We're telling you what is optimal. I don't think anyone who's thinking about DMing a game should freak out and say, oh my gosh, because think about everything we're telling you. You should maybe try to come up with personalities for the NPCs. You should give the NPCs names to have them in advance. Also have a list for any NPCs that come. That's a lot of work.
Right.
You should strive for this, but, it's not the end of the world.
What we did in the basic game, I mean, this is my notes. I, again, went to Matt Koval. He made a PDF. This is the sheet. It has the map. It has brief descriptions. And the only thing I had to improv was, the way they started the module. Because basically, there was no plug-in, the hook, to get the characters to this adventure. So I created a tavern. I called it a nondescript character. You know, the copper. What did I call it? The copper.
The rusty dagger.
Rusty dagger. Just threw that out there.
And which is why it's nice as a player to take notes and to keep that with you.
So I didn't write Rusty Dagger, but I wrote Rufus as the bartender and John and Alyssa. And so I made those up, and so you don't have to do a lot of prep. And level 1 is be comfortable enough to run combat. You can be fair, be able to interact and understand the things of it. If you can write a list of names or go online and get them. One of the don'ts about names, and when you use a random generator, you may see great fantasy names. So I have one of my recurring villains in the campaign I'm running is called Lord Neo-Nargle. Sounds great. The player characters like Lord, that guy, Nargle, Noseguard, and like, no, it's Neo-Nargle. He's the Dark Lord who's returned. They don't care.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Dribbler's good. I should have just called it. Vecna. Why is Vecna good? It's two syllables. You got to remember it.
So short and memorable. Is that what you're saying?
Short and memorable. Try not to go with these huge names unless you have players who are going to go all in. And there are some, and if they are, then you should always go for the person who's really invested, because that's the player that just like you as subscribers, we're doing it not only for ourselves but the people who subscribe. That's what keeps us going, and you want to put the effort in. So why are all the merchants cheap, omniscient, and angry?
Are they?
They are.
Okay. Well, why don't you explain it? Why are they? I want to know. Why are they?
Every time the players, that's the player's big complaint. When they go to the thing, no, we're not going to haggle with you. It's always going to cost more. Actually, we never get a deal. And they seem to know all the prices throughout the realm.
Yeah. And they seem surprised actually if the price being charged is just at the list price in the player's handbook. They're like, really? It's not plus 10%?
Right.
Well, I think it was the Borderlands. In the Borderlands, I think said that the keep it's higher because you're out there in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I guess okay. So that's a good question. I can tell you from a DM standpoint, I think that the players quite understandably are always looking for the best deal, as they should be, because their money's limited. If you're playing by the book and you're charging them for training, they may not have enough money to train, so you get it.
And they have 100 gold piece upkeep per month per level, which we tend to hand wave, but that's in the book as well, correct?
Correct. That is correct. I think from the DM standpoint, I would be concerned of setting a precedent too much. So I guess from my standpoint as a DM, it's just a lot easier to go with the list price. To me, it's not really exciting to spend time haggling over the price of a flask of oil.
Right.
I want to get adventuring. And so even if in reality there would be a lot of haggling, to me, I would rather just say, look, it's the price in the book. Let's not waste our time haggling over it. So I guess that would be as a DM, that would be my answer to that question.
Well, just like yesterday, that we had to go to a priest or a cleric, and we got list price, and we tried to do this and that, and we almost got charged more.
I would have started, because I think it was 7,000 for the exorcism. Honestly, I probably would have said 9.
Yeah.
Just because I know you guys, and I know you guys are going to haggle.
Cheap, omniscient, they know all the prices, and angry. They like, well, basically, if you upset me, you're not going to get anything. And I guess you didn't like the idea that. So a little inside baseball. Raised Dead in the GM Dungeon Master's Guide. The cost of that is 5,000. Exorcism was 7,000, basically.
Right.
So I thought about murdering the character who was possessed and bringing him back, because I assumed the creature that possessed him, assuming it was exorcism, would be released from that. But apparently, the cleric said no.
Well, we don't. I don't know. I just questioned. I don't know.
2,000 gold. That's a lot of money.
It is interesting that the exorcism costs more. Yeah.
I was going to stone cold murder him, but we didn't, and we just paid that. But there was no haggling. There was nothing. I think it's, that is the kind of game you want to do. How much time? I think as we got older, if we were younger, it was a lot more fun because we had a lot more time. You could spend an hour jibber jabbering, but we don't have a lot. We want to get in the dungeon, and you waste a lot of time with that. Yeah. So
I guess my thought on that is, for that very reason, that you want to get things moving along, is. And where does it end? So I know, player characters always want, well, I want a discount. So if you're the cleric, or if you're not a cleric, I go to my temple, whatever, my church.
Right.
Don't I get a member discount? Where's the member discount? Well, have you prayed recently? Well, yeah, I'm praying all the time. I didn't hear that. So I guess the thing is that at a certain point, as a DM, I just get sort of a sense of just trying to reduce the prices in the player's handbook.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that to me, I mean, where does it end? I mean, let's put it this way: it's a training.
Right.
I mean, it's training, so
you can haggle with that because the pressure in first edition is you never have enough money. The cost of training is literally almost all the money they get.
So I guess the question is, do you want to have that kind of game or do you not? So if you want to have that kind of game where there is the pressure of money, then so is it, so if the players, and I get it, they're going to want free training.
Yeah.
Will the elves train me? Will this guy train me?
Right.
Will John the blacksmith train me to be to handle a sword because he's a bastard?
Yeah.
He's so good at it.
He's 1 for 1.
So and so at a certain point, it's just sort of like, well,
he didn't even get hit. He didn't get
no,
touched.
he's great. And the thing is, then, if you give free training, like okay, fine, free training for the elves, free training for everybody. Can you ever charge for training again?
No.
I mean, I guess you can,
No.
but there's boo,
Right.
and so now is training out. It just, to me, if you're gonna play where money is an issue, if that's the game you want to play, I would just prefer to just assume it's the price in the player's handbook. You're gonna pay. You're not gonna get free training because this is people. Do you really think the elves are running a charity business?
No.
It's like, oh, I'll train you for a week
Right.
for free.
Right. Back to Gygax's thing. You treat them as they are, sentient beings that have self-interest. They're not altruistic in any sense. They have to do that. I think the two parts that makes first edition, that's part of the first edition appeal. One is money means something, and you have ways to spend it, and there's a lot of rules on how to extract money from people because and that's definitely a first tier. If you want to break up the game to low level play, when you play from levels 1 to 5, money is very critical. Once you get to 15th level, it doesn't matter. Money becomes irrelevant. You cannot spend the money fast enough. And you can try to constrain it, but it becomes problematic. And the other kind of axiom of first edition Dungeons & Dragons is that everything in the book is the optimal price. In other words, the price you're paying for that plate mail is 400 gold pieces if you have a good relationship, that you're a human talking to another human. So, flipping around what Dan said, when you talk to the priest, it's assuming you're a member of the priest, and that's why it's 7,000. If you were from another deity or everything else, it actually should be 25,000. And we don't, and players don't think that way. They think that's the highest price. It's like the list price, and they're working down. We have to keep reminding people, no, this is the discount price. It goes up from there, just like with fighting. If you fight with your proficient weapon, you get no bonuses. If you fight with a weapon you're not proficient in, you get minuses. It's not that you're proficient in everything, and then if you're good at stuff, you get higher. Later editions change that, but that's how first edition works. It starts with the premise of, this is the best it's going to be, and it goes downhill from there.
Right, so the sense I get is the premise of 1E, from what I'm hearing from you, and I don't disagree, is that you should be happy, not to be penalized.
Right.
I'm not penalizing you,
That's
and
right.
you should be happy.
Right.
And I should mention, in all fairness, to the player's side, is that as the DM, I probably take joy in upping the price.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna if 9,000. So in all fairness, the players could be sitting here having the same conversation, saying, the DMs don't like haggling. Oh, but they love to up the price. Yeah. And so, I guess sort of, I wonder if this is sort of the conversation that you have at the beginning of a campaign. You say, look, let's talk about money and how much things cost. Yeah. And whether we're going to, and maybe as a DM you say, look, I prefer, if that's what you want to do, I prefer not to spend my time on a lot of haggling. So what I'm not going to do is, I'm not going to be upping a lot of prices for you, but I don't be haggling to lower. Let's just make things simple, unless there's something very unusual. The price is going to be in the player's handbook. There's not going to be free training. The prices are in the player's handbook just to keep everybody on the same page.
Right, exactly. So I think the only thing I would say with that, and we're going to talk about some of this, it's just like anything in the game. You can just do it without a mechanic component, or you can use the mechanics, and we'll talk about some of that. So there is a feature of 1E and before editions, and I don't know how much it's kind of waned as a style of play, at least from my looking at future editions, the idea of hirelings and henchmen. And this was a kind of a vital thing when you see things about from the 70s. The parties were massive. They had lots of people, lots of characters traversing through a dungeon. It wasn't the 4 superheroes going in. There was 15, 20 things, and they break out into basically hirelings versus henchmen. So Dan, we talk a little bit about what's your understanding of the difference between a hireling and a henchman?
So my understanding, and this was from talking to you before this podcast, because when I started playing around 1980. Well, we were not using a lot of hirelings and henchmen. Yeah. Maybe we should have. But hirelings, my understanding, is a lesser skilled character. A henchman is what we, I think, back in the day would have called your followers.
Like a follower, yeah.
The follower. No, followers, they just follow you. They don't get paid. They don't get paid. Are they just like, you're amazing?
Right. No,
we want to follow you.
These henchmen get paid.
These henchmen get paid.
They're more like bodyguards for you. There's a bunch of ways to it.
So, I don't have a lot of knowledge about hirelings and henchmen just because we tended, and I don't know, you talk about the 70s, I don't know if things started changing in the 80s, but with the games I played, it was basically us 4, we're going in. The idea of having extra NPCs, or extra hirelings or henchmen, the red shirts, Star Trek reference, we didn't do that much. But you're right, Gary Gygax, I believe, in B2, I think talks about, or somewhere talks about, it might be in the DMG, the smart party
is going to look to recruit people.
Yes, has a lot of people there. Now, what makes it very challenging from the DM standpoint is the party is probably going to want to hire a hireling or a henchman to be cannon fodder. Is that fair to say often?
Yes.
Well, we were talking about playing NPCs intelligently. Yeah. Telling the NPCs getting very low pay, probably the henchmen or hirelings getting very low pay.
Well, relative to a player, yes, but considering...
Well, and that's true. So maybe relatively it's not. Maybe it's a lot of money for this hireling or henchman compared to what they usually make. But the idea of like, hey, run in and attack those goblins. Hey, I've got a family.
Right.
And so I think I think there might be
medical. There's
right. Is there medical? Right. I don't remember hearing about medical insurance. Is there a life insurance policy?
Right. I didn't get a goldenrod piece of paper. I'm just a stat on someone's paper.
This could be an interesting negotiation. This could be a session in itself where you're negotiating
contracts.
Nowadays, we're unionized. We've got a collective bargaining agreement here.
That could be the whole game.
You can only use union hirelings.
Right.
Right. There's like a picket line if you don't.
Well, there's guilds there. I mean, now
that's right.
In fact, that could be the whole game: setting up the guild and running contracts.
Yeah, the henchman guild or something.
That's right.
Hireling and henchman's guild.
So Adventure 1 doors.
Right.
And then if you take the treasure and use that to set up your hireling guild. This campaign's amazing.
You know what was amazing is somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was online or just one of the party members, they said they appreciated learning about doors. Do you remember that? Somebody said, it may have been John in our group. He said, I appreciated learning about the difference between the doors.
Oh, let's see.
I think he was being serious.
No, I think you've done, if there was a place to submit your paper for peer review, if you had a paper.
We should start a journal. We should start like an academic first edition.
That's right. Journal. Something else to work on.
Yeah.
That would be crazy. Hopefully we're going to work on GROGTALK instead. But you're right, Dan. A hireling is kind of simple help. They can either be standard hirelings, which are basically the idea of when you're first level, you would have people to carry your stuff, torch bearers. The idea of, think of that Raiders of the Lost Ark where they have people helping with the diggers and these type of things to help dig in the expedition. But they're not combaters. They don't fight. They don't do anything like that.
And I think, if I recall correctly, your son, who was in my group for a bit, made very good use of a hireling henchman. They watched the horses.
Right.
So you're going into the dungeon. You don't want to just leave your horses there because somebody will come by and take your horse.
Right.
I thought that was a very nice, I liked that use of hirelings.
Yeah, so examples are pack handler, tailor, teamster, valet, lackey, limner. These individuals do all sign painting, drawing, and heraldic devices, etc.
Now, which one was a limner?
Glades.
As a matter of fact, Glades, this might not be a surprise. You know what's coming?
What?
Glades is going to return to. Glades is going to be a limner hireling. Glades is giving up adventuring. She's returning to,
Okay. She may change her mind.
To limning?
It's a limning, I guess. Right. So these are simple. They daily costs range between 1 silver piece and 10 silver pieces. Actually, a limiter is 10 silver pieces a day.
Was there?
You actually made more money just doing your job. I think this was almost a net loss on what this.
Yeah, and less chance of death.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going back to being a limiter.
So, and then expert hirelings are armorers, alchemists, mercenary soldiers, and this really doesn't talk about men at arms. It talks about different types. So this is an area where if they're in a large enough city, if they want a couple of spearmen or other thing to brings, you should encourage that because 2 players it's very difficult. You have to either tone down the dungeon challenges or there's always an opportunity because what they can do, even if they don't fight, if someone goes down, they can grab the injured character and bind them and take them back. So that's always good. Now a hireling and this is on page 28, 29, up through 37. So hirelings is one part. Then they talk about henchmen and this idea of because player death is very likely, and that's always a challenge. We had or incapacitation, and when we used to play, because we had a small group, each player had 2 characters. So if you had 4 players, that meant 8 players. And if we didn't have that many people, then we hired hirelings, or we would get NPCs that would join the party. And then as the dungeon master, you just had to be careful that they weren't running into combat. And most players understood they were not going to, they would fight, but they're not going to go in first. They're not going to open the door first. They're not going to do these type of things. And so there's rules about how to recruit them, and the interaction. The advantage of a hireling or henchman is they are DM info conduits. Basically, they're ways for the dungeon master to provide information to the group, should they want to, without it sounding like the voice from above coming down. Like when Dan, you mentioned in our game, you talk to John. Hey, John, what can we do here? What's the plan here? Trying to see if John said, "Oh yes, you're going to stand over there and shoot your arrows, throw oil there, and he's going to come, and it's going to work perfectly." And you're hoping that the dungeon master kind of gives you a tell on how to do that. So it can be useful. There's also a downside to it. So, but henchman is an opportunity for you to have another character that you don't roll up, and that if something should happen, the player could assume the henchman. In kind of that, what's happened with one of our friends, his character died, saved someone, and then they came back as the player, right? And then of course she died as well.
Which one was?
There was a paladin who saved the the slave cook or something, and she went off after that.
Chapel of Silence.
That's right. The
adventure.
The Tower of Silence, that module, which is still burned in my head of horrors that was in there. But yes, she was escaped from the vampire or something like that. Mm-hmm. She went off after the paladin who saved her died, became a paladin, and died the exact same way. In the same room, I think.
What do you guys have to complain about?
I'm not complaining. I'm just stating, are these the facts as we recall them?
Those facts seem to be quite accurate,
okay.
Yes.
So I think the key for the Dungeon Master is, and they talk about in the Dungeon Master's Guide, is whether it's a second player or a henchman or hireling, they are not extensions of the player character. They're not just a separate area to store stuff. I couldn't go to my henchman and go, "Give me your +1 sword."
I think, didn't I? And I think this upset one of the players in our group. I think in the Borderlands game, I don't know if you're there or not, things were going pretty badly. And I had the hirelings ran.
Right.
The hirelings just left.
Right.
And I think one of the players was pretty incredulous that had happened. But I played them like there was like a lot of mayhem, and it was not pretty. Right. And they bolted.
Right, and there is, if you want to play it by the book, which is a challenge because I had to write a spreadsheet to help with this. There's morale checks.
Yeah. And
Basic had a really good way of doing it. They have a morale number, and you roll 2d6, and if you go over the morale, they flee. If they stay under, they fight, or some version of that. Here, there's percentages based on how many of your team has been injured, how many people you've killed on their side, if the leader's alive, if the leader's incapacitated, and you have to figure and what hit dice they are, blah, 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 and then you roll, and then there's different sets. So it's more realistic, but it's hard to do. Yeah. And I think one of the other rules I always say is, and we had this issue yesterday, roll the dice first and then figure out
Because if you roll a 0-0,
right,
you probably don't need to worry about modifiers
right,
or a 0-1.
or yeah, if you needed a 15 to hit and you rolled a 1, or you're not sure, I'm going to try to hit. All right, try. I rolled a 1.
Yeah,
okay.
we had a long discussion about what modifier or whatever it was,
Right.
right? And then they finally, after about 5 minutes or 10 minutes of debating it, they rolled and it's like a 2 or something like that. And
well, it was
anyway.
It was when the attack happened, and we're trying to figure out when it happened. Like, and finally we said, go ahead, you can roll your dice. He rolled a 4.
Right,
Like,
and that was
just roll it. And
didn't matter. Yep.
So, so that's a style of play. Do you want small groups of player characters, not a whole lot of NPCs? Because the more NPCs you have, the more homework you have for as a dungeon master, because you have to keep them, make sure they don't become one character. You know, Glades and I think you did a pretty good job. Pixie and Glades, you kept saying, well, Pixie does this and Glades does that. A lot of times they just become Pixie Glades or
right.
Bladesy or whatever you want to call it. So, okay, so the next section we're talking about is, you know, how do you transition from, so again with the hobgoblin, let's say you Glades and John were in the room, the hobgoblin's holding Alyssa, and you're parlaying, you're trying to negotiate. How do you transition from you know, becomes from nonverbal or some kind of surprise or initiative? How do you handle that?
So if I'm the
so you're the player.
I'm the player.
Oh no, you're the DM. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're the DM, and I'm the hobgoblin, and I roll the reaction roll. You know, how do you transition from parlaying to when a combat or something happens?
Oh, so okay. So you meaning so usually I would have then I would say okay I would just announce the action that's happening and say okay so if I'm the DM and I'm playing the hobgoblin and the parlaying isn't working, then I have to make a decision as to whether or not I think that the hobgoblin might have a chance to surprise. I know players hate having to roll for surprise. If they're standing there and they're talking and then all of a sudden having to roll for surprise, because surprise is deadly in first edition. You can be surprised for multiple rounds. You'd be dead by the time the surprise round is over. So I don't know, how do you handle it?
Well, and I think this is one I've gone back and forth, but I've noticed in your group, I get it somewhat as well. You know, we're talking, all of a sudden I want to cast sleep or I want to cast this or that.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're basically trying to do the draw, kind of, you know, basically a standoff. And they're saying as they're talking, they're going to shoot first.
Yeah.
And the idea is because they've announced it that they should get the jump automatically. And so you could give them the advantage to that, but then that just encourages them to less parlay because they're parlaying and all of a sudden, well, I cast sleep or I cast hypnotism. In the adventure we did here, as soon as I think it's moved, as soon as someone declares an action that's aggressive, so just like it would be not fair, to your point, if the hobgoblin's is going to cut the throat of Alyssa. Well, you could say, well, he decided to do it, and there's nothing you could do. Or you could say, Glades and John are watching, they're talking, and he sees that they're about to press on it. So that's surprise. You should roll. Just like it's not Greedo's shot first. There has to be a way to do that, or else either the dungeon master can say, "Oh, the monsters always go first," or the players always feel like, "I want to cast sleep," and they feel like they should get a free attack, and there really should not be. That's what surprise is supposed to do. Or you can say, "No one's surprised because they're watching each other. It should be initiative."
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that you should do a surprise roll, and you can always adjust it. So I think that if I feel like the players have done a good job, I like to reward, of course, what I think is good play. Because if you don't reward good plays, the players will get discouraged. So if they're parlaying, and I think that the hobgoblin is basically buying it to an extent, and then they all of a sudden start to cast sleep, what I probably would do then is something in between. So I wouldn't say, okay, you're going to get it automatically, but what I'll do is I'll give a surprise roll on the hobgoblin, and maybe it's just a straight up roll. Maybe I'll add 1 or 2 based upon it. So I guess I would play it based upon the situation. Do I feel like the players have actually done a good job of sort of surprising, as opposed to just trying to do what you're saying, is just kind of taking advantage continuously of always getting the first shot? I think I would probably do a surprise roll. I'm a big fan of looking at the situation, saying, okay, do I think this player is coming up with a good idea? Let me give you an example. something I would have changed in the last game. I played it as the adventure was written. But
that was the first thing I would change.
Exactly, yeah. Actually, I did change a lot of it. He looks at the maps, the visitor information maps in the dungeon, and he asked if there's a map of the dungeon. Well, it didn't say there was. In retrospect, I probably would have said yes. Not the whole layout,
right,
but maybe like the next level.
Sure.
Because I thought it was really insightful, because they said, well, these are they're old visitor information pamphlets.
Yeah.
Welcome to
Dwarven Glory. If they're there, they should have some way to get around. Makes sense.
And it was and it was a good idea. No one else was looking at him. He said, well, is there a map? And I look at it, I look at the adventure, and I'm like, no, there's no map.
Right.
I think in retrospect, I probably should have said yes. Not like you've got a list of every level.
You don't hand the map to them and go.
Right, exactly. But maybe for the next level, you've got for it. So
that's encouraging good play. I agree.
And that's the way I would handle what you're talking about with the surprise. If I think I'm encouraging good play, I'll do it. If I think it's not good play and they're just trying to always do it to take advantage, I'm probably going to shut it down.
And so the way I approach it, and I don't disagree with that. I think depending on your players, especially if they're less experienced, they may not know what they can get away with. So this is where using the mechanics to help them understand the game is helpful. So in that situation, you could use surprise, you could use initiative, or you could use a dex check potentially, or you could change the initiative surprise based on their dex modifier. Because what you want to do is you want to also reward the attributes of the characters, and you want to keep using them so that some characters will be better than others. What tends to happen is some players they want to do everything. They want their character to fight and steal and hunt, and the way the game is set up is each person has a role, and they need to depend on each other. And so if you have the thief who's very dexterous or a fighter who's very dexterous, they should be able to react quicker than the fighter who's in heavy plate mail who wants to, I'm going to take the drop and I'm going to take my my two-handed sword and attack perfectly at the hobgoblin but not attack Alyssa. So to me it's trying to encourage that by doing I just don't like sometimes when the player just goes, well, they announced something, and because they've announced it first in the room, that's what happens, and that to me, then you get them all shouting about what they're going to do, and
right.
And what it should be is, okay, you're going to do that. That means that's an action. There's going to be initiative for that, or you know what, the hobgoblin, to your point, is at ease. He thinks you're going to trust them, and he read you wrong, so there's going to be a surprise roll, which you'll get advantage with your dex.
And I think the nice thing is the vast majority of players, if the DM announces why the DM is making a particular decision, and adopts an approach which makes some sense, the player's okay with it.
Right.
So, if you say, okay, I'm going to do it, this is what I'm going to handle it. Because of this, I'm going to do a surprise. Or because of this, I'll give you first hit, whatever. As long as you explain why, and you give a somewhat rational answer, most players, they accept it. So they want to feel, I think the players want to feel that they are being treated fairly with their decisions. They're not just being shut down, but they're being treated fairly. And as long as they think they're being treated fairly, even if they don't think it's the right decision, I think most players are okay with it.
And what's interesting is when you go to combat, when we talks about combat next session, the reaction, the encounter reaction, which you can use not only for during combat or not, happens after initiative. The idea is if you think combat's going to happen, you still should do initiative. See who has initiative, then they would react to whatever the circumstance is. So you still have the situation of you could roll also. The hobgoblin didn't understand that you're casting sleep, or maybe you were trying to back away and they reacted violently from that. So there's a whole bunch of ways you can do it. I try to keep it consistent, make a rational statement, and move it forward. So now we're going. One of the things you should try to do is, again, I'm a fan of using the stats so that people who have high stats, their characters they should be playing towards that. And one of the other things we talked about, dump stats, I'll use the air quote again, they're stats that are not useful for the class that you're in. So a lot of people, charisma is not an important stat, druids, they're important, Paladins are important. I think bards, illusionists may need to have some charisma. Everyone else doesn't, so their lowest stats always in there. Well, this is where in interactions, if you want a character wants to talk a lot, you can use their charisma bonus gives a plus or minus to the reaction roll. So that's on page 63. So I asked Dan's character to do a reaction check a number of times. That was based on his charisma, so that the charisma means something. Because if you don't use it, then it's not used unless you're doing henchmen. It's a kind of a stat that gets forgiven. Everyone puts it in strength and dex and con. Those are the top three, and then intelligence or wisdom. And that kind of leads into the roles the players have. Role play, ROLL versus ROLE play. How do you balance the difference between role playing and role playing with ROLE?
Well, I think obviously you want to have both. I've mentioned before where your son, who was playing in our group, announced 3 hours in he hadn't rolled a die, and I thought that was a fair statement.
Yeah.
Players like to roll dice. I do when I'm a player. I do as a DM.
Yeah.
We have a co-DM sometimes, as you know,
yeah.
and I, who handles most of the combat. And I say, hey, can I roll the initiative? I want to roll a die.
Right.
I like rolling.
Right. It's a game.
It's a game. It's fun to roll dice.
Except the 20.
Except the 20. Yeah, that was terrible. So I think that you obviously want a healthy balance. I mean, it depends a lot on the players, too. I mean, so I think what the DM has to understand is that at the end of the day, if the DM wants to have a lot of role-playing, ROLL playing, or role-playing with an E, it may vary based upon the party.
Yeah.
If the party is looking to do a lot of combat, which I assume we're talking about role ROLL playing,
yeah.
You're talking about primarily a lot of combat, right? Because that's where most of your dice are going to be rolled,
Yep.
as opposed to interactions with NPCs and parlaying with monsters. And I think you obviously want to have a balance, but you may not have a lot of control. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, but you may not have a lot of control over it as the DM, or as much as you'd want.
Well, the first thing is stating the goal. I think one of the things that turns off new players, particularly, if they're coming from a tabletop playing a game where they roll, they have a certain list of actions and they do them, but they want to get to it, is seeing these great flourishing role play. Now, we are not voice actors, we're not actors, I'm not sure we're DMs at this point, but we don't do a great job of it, but we do some role playing. Some of our players will try to get into their character more, some will just state things, so that you should allow for both styles of play, but I find beginning level, they either go totally all into it. If they're the brooding anti-hero, they sit there the whole time and they won't even say anything. They try to play method acting. Or the other ones, I didn't come here to go to afternoon theater. I just want to roll dice. And so you should be able to do both, because when you have this interaction, right, you could say, I'm talking to the merchant, and I start putting on, and now, dear sir, may I partake in your fine clothiers that you have? And you could say, oh, he did a really good job. I'm going to not charge him 3 times the cost. I'm only going to charge him list price. That's one way to do it. Or you can just say, my character is going to try to persuade the merchant to give me a deal based on my charisma.
Yeah, I think a way to immediately pick up on whether somebody enjoys role-playing, ROLE, is to watch whether the player says what the character is saying, or the player says it. So, for example, player says, so I walk into the bar and I ask the bartender, are there any good places around here? Versus, okay, I go up to the bartender and this is what I say, my good man. If they're actually doing the dialogue as opposed to describing and summarizing the dialogue, I think that's, and one's not right or wrong. It's just, I think that's a quick way to figure out who you're dealing with.
Right, so on the one side of the spectrum is state the goal. I want to intimidate the guard to let me in.
Right.
And you can say, okay, what's your charisma? My charisma is 15, so I'm highly charismatic, and I'm a big, strong fighter. You roll down the reaction roll, you see what happens.
That's terrible. Sorry, I should not say that. See, that to me is not.
But that's a pure mechanical way to do it, right? That's on the one extreme. I don't want to. I want to be a game. I'm a big, strong half orc. I'm going to try to intimidate. And later editions have mechanics. It's called intimidation or persuasion or anything like that. That's on the one side. The other side is we have complete role playing, and depending on how theatric I am, and if you look at me again, I will cut your throat and murder your whole family. And then the DM kind of goes, wow, that was really good. And then the middle ground you're talking about is the dialogue, where we interact. And if I say things well and I get my points across, but maybe I don't use all the accents, you give me an advantage. You either may say it happens, or you say, well, give me a roll, a charisma roll, or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you broke that down into 3 of them, because, the first one, it seems to me you just want to, you're not really playing your character. You're not getting into character. You're saying, I have a character with these stats.
Right.
And my character has a 15 charisma, so I'll let my 15 charisma character take over.
Right.
Give me a roll, because look, I don't know I'm not a 15. I'm
right.
just a 7 charisma
and that's,
in real world.
And that's the argument.
And I get that, because
we don't ask, we don't ask them to fight. Right?
That's right. I get it.
We say he has 18 strength. I clearly don't have 18 strength. We don't say, well, wrestle the big guy out across the street and see if you can do that. We just say you have 18 strength and you've done that, and that's the one argument. But the other one then becomes so your point is it becomes mechanical.
Because I think what you should do. So what I was thinking when I said, oh, that's terrible, right? Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
It's terrible.
But I think what
comment below if it's terrible.
You know what they're all going to say? This podcast is terrible. They're probably right. So
stop with that. That'd be great.
Why are you still listening at this point?
That's right.
You really, if you think this is terrible and you're listening to this at this point, you don't have a lot to do. Okay.
That's right.
So I think the difference is what I really don't like, and my understanding is this is not, old school is not, hey, I have a 15 charisma, so I'm just going to roll to see if I'm successful getting by the guard.
Right.
My understanding of old school is you've got to at least explain what you're going to, not like you said, you're not just stating the goal. You don't have to necessarily say, I go up to the guard and I grab him and I say, if you don't let me in, you can say, just describe what you're going to do. I'm going to grab him by the collar and I'm going to threaten him that I'm going to kill him. I think that's great. I don't expect my players to do all the theatrics and to do the voices.
But a little more than I just want to intimidate.
But you've got to explain.
Sure.
And so I think it's between. I would expect. It's not going to happen. When I'm running a game, I don't want to run that game if it's a 1E game where it's the first thing you're talking about. I am going to expect at least that you explain how you're going to do it. And you know what? I'm going to assume that when you're doing, if you're 15 charisma and trying to persuade somebody, I'm going to assume that how you're describing it to me is being done by somebody with a 15 charisma. I'm not going to say like, oh, you're fumbling over your words. You're terrible. Right. Are you sure? I wouldn't do that.
That's great. And I think, hybrid is probably the best because you don't want to, if the play you want is kind of in the middle and maybe to the other side where you want some role playing, you want to encourage the people who are just like, well, I have an 18 charisma. I have the highest charisma. I should get advantage. I just didn't do that. You need to encourage the people who are at least doing some of it so that they move towards that way. So how do you deal with player versus player? Because some of the encounters are not, as a DM, we tend to think about, well, if the players are interacting, we don't have to get involved. When are times that would you get involved with player versus player discussion? It may not even be a combat. And how do you adjudicate some of that? Or there's some advice you need to give?
Well, so I guess I'd want to know what kind of interaction is happening. So if the players are simply having a discussion of what to do next, I'm staying out of it. So is there a particular type of interaction that you're thinking of that would necessitate the DM?
The classic thief opens the chest, and we don't really talk about communication, but we could talk about do you have an open table? Do you, so the thief opens the chest, and you as a dungeon master, you could write a note to say, because we announce what's in there, but the thief could be like, no, I don't want anyone to know. What do I see? We just make it easier on ourselves, but I used to do in the old past. Once you get that one player's like, if I do something, I don't want other people to know. Then you have to write a note and hand it to the person, and they look, or if it is a public thing where you say it, they go, I don't tell the rest of the party. I put the stuff in my pocket. And now you have this metagame issue because the magic user heard that there was a wand or a ring that the thief stuck in his or her pocket, and now you have the player-on-player discussing. How do you handle that kind of situation?
Yeah, so I think it depends, again, as it often does, on your party. There's going to be parties that want to do a lot of metagaming. There's others that don't want to do a lot of metagaming. I mean, for me, the dream party is a party that doesn't want to do metagaming. They don't want to know. That's part of the excitement to them. The things are happening fast. They only know what they know. They're really getting into the role-playing aspect of it. If you've got you mentioned the thief. It usually is the thief. If a note's being handed to the DM by a player, it's often the thief. I don't know. I guess I haven't DM'd enough to really have gotten involved in any real issues with the party. I know the party had an issue with one player once who went off on their own, found a secret passage and went off on their own,
Right.
and there was sort of an intervention. The party had a talking to.
We're going to probably have that in our session, because when you have 10 or 11 people and one person goes off and does his thing or her thing, the rest of the party is just sitting there. And I know for a long time, and I don't know if you've changed this, you would pull them aside and go out and talk to them. Now, when it's you and Ed co-DMs, he's the co-founder of the group that we have, then that's fine. You got one DM who can work on one another, but you basically are doing. So keep going on. How do you steer the group one way or another, or do you steer the group one way or another?
You mean steer them toward a goal? So is the issue kind of the railroading versus non-railroading?
Well, just do you encourage the thief when the thief announces he's starting to play? He's like, I don't want anyone to know what I find. I will tell them. The character will tell the party what I find.
Yeah.
And if I want to go off, and then you used to pull people aside. And now half the time you're sitting out there. Is that you okay with that, or you try to discourage that?
I'm okay with it I think it's reading the table. I'm okay with it if the party's okay with it. I think most the problem is that I think it's very unusual to get a group of players that are all looking for the same thing. I mean, I totally understand that. So as a player, I really like the role playing, the ROLE playing aspect of it. But that's just my opinion. I'm not a big fan of combat. There's you'd think the opposite from this disaster.
You're not a big fan. I can tell why you're not a big fan.
See, I'm terrible at it, right? This is why I'm not a big fan.
You should avoid it at all costs.
And let me be clear. I think I'm a pretty terrible player. It doesn't mean I don't have fun doing it. Well, no, but it doesn't mean I don't have fun doing it. But it's hard. Being a good player, in many respects, I think perhaps being a good DM is easier because you control so much. I think being a good player is very hard. It's very challenging. It's tough, and it's very easy to fall into being not a good player. That's probably a whole separate podcast. Yeah. But so to answer your question is, my concern is that when you've got a group of players, you're going to have people want different things, and there's going to be some players there that don't appreciate the play. They think it's everyone's in this together. Yeah. They're not going to appreciate the thief. I mean, passing the notes, which Gygax said, I believe somewhere, that the thief should actually be dinged in terms of their rating for how the 1, 2, 3, or 4, the quality of their adventuring, if they didn't take an opportunity every now and then to take a little bit of money. Now that doesn't necessarily mean stealing from your party members, I can't remember, but sort of grabbing something from the goblin that's been slain without telling anybody. This is what thieves do typically, and so I think it's appropriate. And I wouldn't have an issue with it. I would find it sort of as long as the parameters at the outset of the campaign were clear. Look, no evil players, right? So I don't have to worry about, are you out to kill me?
Right.
No one's out to kill each other. We're all in this together, but we may have, look, you got a thief, and we may have different angles.
Right.
Then a little bit of separate play, I think, is fine and keeps a little bit of mystery to it, as long as I think somebody isn't being a jerk about things. The problem is, I think you're going to have some players that don't like that. Yeah. And I think the most important thing, I think, for a successful game is keeping everybody happy. and satisfied and wanting to come and play. And the problem is, if you got a couple players who are getting unhappy with the passing of the notes, then I'm going out and
they may leave.
They may leave. So, a long answer to your question, but I think it depends upon your players. I think it's without everyone on the same page, and maybe this is talking about expectations at the beginning. Unless everyone's on the same page and okay with that, I would tend to. I think it should be avoided. But my problem is as the DM, I don't know yet that I've got the confidence to curb that. So I sort of step back and let that play out. I'm like, okay, if this is what would happen, this is what would happen. I'm sort of like, I'm just watching. I'm just the umpire. Maybe that's not such a good approach. So you've DM'd more than I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how you would handle something.
Well, I tend to let them go. I think what they sow, they will reap. And so, like in the group that you run, we are not playing all good characters. We're playing neutral, basically selfish characters. And so, like, I was thinking about last night. There was a big turn of events where the de facto leader was is paralyzed, and my character, who's kind of not the greatest, but he's the only cleric, went from being probably one of the wimpier characters to now is pretty much in charge, only because he has successfully has 5 ghouls and 4 skeletons in his command.
Yeah.
And so he's a 19-year-old kid who's never had this amount of power, and he's chaotic neutral. He's kind of chaos. And what will he do with that power? The standard answer is he'll do nothing. He's going to help the party. But is that really what this character would do, being a 19-year-old kid? And so part of it is putting my experience hat. I want the game to go on. I want to do it well, but I also want to play my guy. That's what makes it fun. It's finding that line to not cross over to. If I'm not having fun, no one's having fun. So I have to decide what I'm going to do with that. Maybe I'll poke the bear with a couple of people just to show that there is, but how far do you take it? Because you don't want the situation. I think that's why the game is best. It's easiest to run and makes sense when everyone is good, because they have this social contract. They all know, hey, and then you're dealing with one turns evil because of a spell or something, which we're going to segue into next. I tend to let them go. I think the challenge is, when you start getting player-on-player combat, then you have to be very fair, and you have to adjudicate it, and you have to let the chips fall where they may. I think before it gets into that, if you start seeing signs that that's going to happen, like with the thief, or you have a character who's hiding their alignment, or where they're an evil character and somehow they've snuck in here, you better have a conversation before that saying your character may die, you may get attacked, and deal with the consequences of that. So that the rule is, for me, characters can be mad, players cannot be mad. I should never be mad at Dan if the ghouls kill us. The character could be mad, but no one should be mad at Dan. And I think the hard part of this is to make sure people don't conflate the person with that. As long as people don't do that, then we're okay. I had to talk to a player who just got mad about someone going off and doing things. I said, you looked upset. I want to make sure you're not upset with the player and the character. No, I was fine, and they worked out. I think that's where the DM's responsibility. I know it's the parties, everyone's responsibility to kind of monitor. You're the host. You're running it. You need to be able to step in for that. But I generally like when they interact, because that's time I don't have to do much, because I can just sit and watch them jibber jabber. And I can, if I want to create tension, I can start doing my favorite thing as they're talking. Ed was doing it too when we were kind of figuring things out. You heard the dice rolling.
Rolling, yeah.
I'm not sure what he's rolling for. He could just be picking up the dice. Like, okay, the clock is ticking. So I think, but we have a neutral party. It could go either way. You signed up for it. I would probably remind people of this every once in a while in your game and even in mine. So, because this is a magical fantasy game, magic can affect encounters, right? You have charm spells, you have suggestion spells. We cast suggestion every week on you, and hopefully you'll fail your save and you'll do what we suggest. There are illusions. Any special challenges with that when, whether the monster's charmed or when the players are charmed? How do you deal with some of that?
So, and I love these spells, and these spells always surprise me when the players are using them. Not because they shouldn't be, but because I'm just not thinking about it. I'll tell you, to be honest, when I write an encounter up, I have an idea of which way the encounter can go, and for whatever reason, I don't think about the possibility that there will be a charm or a suggestion. And so when I have a player character, we have an illusionist, and I think that I really like the fact that John, who plays the illusionist, I love, as you know, I love illusionists. I had illusionists back in the day. You're not so much in love. Well, so he's lucky. He's got at least with me. He's got someone who looks.
He's not a gnome, at least.
He's not a gnome. He's a female human illusionist, and so he's using the suggestion charm. I think they're great spells. I think they're tremendously powerful. I think that these spells enable player characters who otherwise would be weak at low level to play a very important role. So I love the spells, and you know what I love about the charm in particular, and though I don't know that I've dealt with a lot of charm spells, but it would give me an opportunity to role play with an E with the monsters in a way that I otherwise wouldn't be able to. So I think it's harder when the player characters are charmed.
Right.
Because now you've got, so in last night's game we had a player who suffered from memory loss. And so the problem now is that you've got a player character playing the character, but it's really not the player anymore controlling the player character. And that's hard because you as the DM don't want to take over the character, but in the same vein you're asking the character to act in a way that would not be natural for them. So I think it's a lot harder on the game. My feeling is when it's the player characters who are subject of these, because you're saying you will do that. Do I do that? Yes, you will do that. Okay, I do that. Yeah. As opposed to when it's the monsters who are charming.
Well, and that kind of is the level 2 thing. I think your first thing should not have any charm or anything like that because it makes it hard. You never want to. You want the players to decide their own fate, even if they want to drown themselves or fight unstoppable odds. And when you get into the, well, your character feels this or that, players hate that unless they've been playing a long time. I think one of my characters in your game was charmed or something happened to it, and I was helping. Was it the mummy? Wasn't there a mummy or something? I was actually somewhat helping because
I know there's been a mummy.
Right, it was a mummy, and there was something about that. We were charmed or affected or something. Something had done that, and you're part of it. And as a player, that's part of the experience of that. But a lot of players don't like that, and you sometimes don't get to pick. So until your level of sophistication is there, but there's a lot of those type of events in there. There's possession things such as ghosts or can possess you. There's charm. There's a lot of things that manipulate players, and so you always have to be careful with that. I think my thing with it is you definitely want to talk to your players before in that session 0. When this happens, I expect you to follow the thing of the spell, and I'm not going to sit here and write secret notes to you what happened. I'm just going to announce it because we don't have time for some of that.
And I'd like to say I think that Dave, a player in our game, who was subject to the memory loss, did a very good job of handling that situation. And if I recall correctly, he's rolling randomly as to which way he would go and things like that. So he really got in the spirit of it, and I think did a good job.
Yeah, he didn't sit there and go, well, I wouldn't do that. What does this mean? And be argumentative.
Right.
And you just have to be careful with those things. So I think we've encountered this long enough. We've parlayed, we've negotiated, we've made our checks, and now it's time for our segment suggestion. And so, Dan, what suggestion spell are you going to cast on our listeners today?
So I can suggest anything, right? Is this anything?
Anything
about the... All right, so I think what would be appropriate for me to suggest is that people consider at some point attending the GaryCon convention, because I'll be heading off to that soon.
That's right.
It's a wonderful convention.
And where's it at?
It's in Lake Geneva. And so for those of you who know the game will remember that's right. It says it right there. TSR Games, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin.
Exactly.
So where TSR was and Gary Gygax was from. And it's a convention every March. And what's great about it is it's not that big in terms of conventions. I think it's maybe about 2,000 people come to it. And it's a lot of old school gaming. So it's not this enormous convention like a Gen Con. It's smaller and a lot of old school gaming. And so I'd highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun.
Is your game full for Sunday?
Yeah, my game, yep. So I'm running the halls of a Tyson Thane, and it is full. on Sunday, and so I'm excited about that. We'll see how I do. And I got just about every game that I wanted to get. I got, as I mentioned last night, including a game with the multi-talented Janelle Jacrace, which I'm really excited about because, as you know, I've run a couple of her Van Borchak's Lair, Morkendane, I've already run, so really excited about that. So you get an opportunity to game with some legends, and the great thing about that convention too is you don't have to necessarily have a game with a legend to have an amazing game. Yeah. So some of the best games I've had there are, I don't know who this DM is, never heard of them, it's not a featured event, and it was an amazing experience. So that's what I would recommend.
Well, and the advantage of that is it's kind of like once you become a dungeon master and you appreciate it. I think part of my suggestion is if you're the DM, make sure you play it, just like Dan was talking about. He hasn't been playing in a while. Even this simple format, you get to not only appreciate what you like in a game, but you also appreciate the fun that being a player is. We tend to like being a DM and the control and all that, the active thing, but just the joy of playing. And so going to different games and seeing the styles and saying, oh, that really worked well, you should do some of that, but also just enjoy what's going on there. Take it in the moment.
Oh, I've stolen. Good. So I'm playing a game again with another DM. I was very happy to get off the wait list. Carlos Leising was, the way he described. I don't know anything about this. I haven't paid any attention to anything. I've been on it for 29 years. So all this stuff was. I know what isn't there. There's this. This group that is online and they're very animated and all that. I don't know about any of that. So, but I just go to this game. And Carlos, the DM, is describing the combat in such a visual way, and maybe it annoys some people. I thought it was great. Right. I loved it, and so I stole that. As I think I came back,
and you do a great job with it.
And so, I steal stuff all the time.
And that's something I'm putting more and more in as I've watched other DMs, because it used to be I hit, you kill, he's dead. You hit, you miss.
I think some people like that though.
Well, to me that was it. It was the grinding through it's almost the Final Fantasy. You just move up, you have because you only have one animation, right? Your attack, and that was it. So that's great. Well, hopefully they'll fail their save, and you will be there. So if they want to see the celebrity that is Dan, go to see GaryCon. And we're hoping next year. Unfortunately, it didn't work out this year, but I would like to attend. So maybe next year. I know you'll try to go next year. Hopefully, Dan and I will be able to go together. That would be a lot of fun. The idea of Wisconsin in March is just, it's a thrill beyond belief for me, from my perspective. So
that's how they keep attendance low. They're smart.
That's right. I have limited time off from work. I'm going to Wisconsin.
That's brilliant. It's brilliant because they make sure that the people who show up are really dedicated. Right. If you really like old school role-playing games, you will go to Wisconsin in March.
Yeah, the reason it's so packed to get there is because all the people from Wisconsin are coming here for spring break and then having to fly back.
Yeah, and it's in Lake Geneva. So if you don't just fly, you got to fly to Chicago, then you have to drive to Lake Geneva.
Great.
I'm going to put an 80s tape, like a mix. Is that what the kids call it now? Don't you think it'd be appropriate? It's a playlist. Like Safety Dance.
Right.
Right. Rio. Venom.
Right.
It's going to be very... It's gonna...
Safety Dance, Men Without Hats, Venom.
Right.
Slayer, and then Dexter's
Midnight Runners. Yeah, that was a good one. I like that.
Just kind of flip between them.
Yes. Right. From good to evil. The lawful good,
that's right.
Lawful evil tape.
You should have one for each alignment.
Yes.
That could be a great one. I'll write that down.
Yes.
Alignment songs.
A playlist.
Yeah, playlist based on alignment.
But it's got to be the 80s.
Right, well,
that'd be fine. Of course, yeah, that'd be great.
Late 70s you can do too, songs. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 80s and 70s. Perfect. So my suggestion is a site called Donjon. And if you're a DM who's been out there and you're trying to look for ideas, you've run across this place. I don't know who does. I should have looked up who did, but it's the French way of saying dungeon, D-O-N-J-O-N, donjon, which I guess means tower in French, but apparently now it's synonymous. It became anglicized, whatever, and became dungeon. And I use that a lot when, for instance, if you do overland travel and you end up with a random encounter, and it's a small little complex, it's a Minotaur lair instead, if you roll in the monster manual, it says percentage type in lair. So you may have an encounter, but they may not be wandering; they may be in their lair. Well, what does it look like? You don't want to do that on the fly. It'd be nice to have a couple of those. Or in the treasure, they find a treasure map, and the treasure map says 40 miles away there's a hidden cave with money. Well, instead of me hand drawing this, I'm not a great drawer. I'm not an artist. So Don John generates maps, generates players, generates random PCs, random names. You just pull all that up, you bring it in, and it gives you that. There's plenty of other sites. Mithril Mages is another one. So my suggestion is don't start from scratch. I mean, these 3 books are great. But there's plenty of online tools if you're going to want to create your own game or own module or adventure, and you don't want to start from scratch and you don't want to try to figure it out. There's Don John's a great thing for that. So we've been talking for a while. I think this is a good time to stop. So next week we'll have to decide. You'll have to give me some clue what you want to do with if Glades is going to retire, or if we're going to do something, if we're going to continue that. We'll talk about that. We've been getting a lot of feedback on YouTube. We're on YouTube now. We're on Twitter at GROGTALK. So if you want to comment or tweet to us, we're going to keep monitoring that. Hopefully, like I said, this month we're hoping to talk to our friends at Crucible to start that planning process. And there's a lot of good things going on. We're really having a good time with this. So I'm James.
I'm Dan.
Signing off here, and thanks for listening to Grog Talk.